Hello friends. Did you know nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy these stories, please hit that subscribe button and leave a like. It really helps. Thank you for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. I've been a truck driver for 17 years, and I can tell you this. The road teaches you many things and gives you experience. You can't learn these things in a classroom or from books. They're the kind of things that get ingrained in your bones after you've put in enough miles. After you've spent nights where nothing exists but the hum of the engine and the white lines disappearing under your hood. You learn to read the weather before it changes. You learn which rest stops to avoid and which dispatchers will answer the phone at 3 in the morning. You learn that loneliness isn't really loneliness, just a different kind of companionship. My name is Mason Briggs, and I haul freight across the northern routes. Montana, Wyoming, the Dakotas, anywhere the weather can kill you if you're not paying attention. I've driven through blizzards that turned 18-wheelers into toys, ice storms that made the interstate look like a skating rink, and fog so thick you couldn't see your own hood ornament. I've seen it all, or at least I thought I had. This happened in February of 2019. I was running a load of industrial equipment from Billings, Montana to Fargo, North Dakota. It should have been a straightforward run, about 700 miles, maybe 12 hours if the roads were clear, and I didn't hit any delays. The forecast called for snow, but that's nothing unusual for this time of year. Light to moderate snowfall, they said. Visibility might drop to a quarter mile in heavier bands. Standard winter driving conditions for anyone who knows what they're doing. I left Billings just after 4 in the afternoon, wanting to get ahead of the evening traffic and make good time before I had to stop for my mandatory rest break. The truck was a 2016 Freightliner Cascadia, nothing fancy but reliable. I'd been driving her for 3 years and knew every sound she made, every quirk in her handling. The load was secured properly, I'd checked it twice myself, and I had a full tank of fuel and a thermos of coffee that was still hot from the truck stop. The sun was already low on the horizon as I merged onto Interstate 94, casting long shadows across the snow-covered plains. Everything looked normal. The road was clear, just a light dusting of snow on the shoulders. Traffic was sparse but steady. A few other trucks, some passenger vehicles heading home from work. My CB radio crackled occasionally with the usual chatter, drivers warning about speed traps, asking about road conditions ahead, the endless banter that keeps you company when there's nothing else to do. I remember feeling good that day, rested, alert. I'd had a full night's sleep the night before, a decent meal, and the heater in the cab was working perfectly for once. Sometimes you get a feeling before a run, a kind of intuition about how it's going to go. I've learned to trust those feelings over the years. But that day, I didn't feel anything unusual. Just another winter haul across the high plains. The snow started about an hour into the drive, right around the time I crossed into North Dakota. At first, it was exactly what the forecast had promised. Light, scattered flakes that melted on the windshield before the wipers could sweep them away. I barely had to turn the wipers on. The other drivers on the road didn't even slow down. Nobody was worried. But weather in this part of the country can change fast, real fast. 1 minute you're driving under a light snowfall with clear visibility, and the next you're in a full-blown blizzard wondering if you're even still on the road. I've seen it happen dozens of times. That's why you stay alert, why you keep checking your mirrors and your gauges, why you never get comfortable. By the time I passed the exit for Beach, North Dakota, the snow was coming down harder. Not a whiteout yet, but definitely more than light snowfall. I could still see the road clearly, still see the taillights of the car about 100 yards ahead of me. The wipers were working steadily now, their rhythmic thumping almost hypnotic. I turned up the CB radio, listening for any reports from other drivers about conditions further east. This is Roadrunner heading west on 94, just past Dickinson. A voice crackled through the speaker. Snow's getting pretty thick out here, boys. Visibility's down to maybe 1/8 of a mile. Road's still passable, but it's getting slick. Y'all be careful. I keyed the mic. Copy that, Roadrunner. This is Big Sky heading east, about 40 miles behind you. Appreciate the heads up. No problem, Big Sky. Stay safe out there. I clicked off and settled back into my seat, adjusting my grip on the steering wheel. The temperature outside had dropped to about 15 degrees Fahrenheit. Cold enough that the snow wasn't melting on the road anymore. It was accumulating. I could feel the subtle change in how the tires gripped the pavement, that barely perceptible shift that tells you the road is getting hazardous. The smart thing to do would have been to pull off at the next exit, find a truck stop or rest area, and wait out the worst of the storm. But I'd been driving these roads for 17 years. I knew how to handle snow. I knew how to read the road, how to feel the truck's response to changing conditions. And I was on a schedule. The load needed to be in Fargo by 8 the next morning, and I was already going to be cutting it close even if everything went perfectly. So I kept driving. The car ahead of me took the next exit, leaving me alone on the road. I checked my mirrors. No headlights behind me either. The only light came from my own truck, the beams cutting through the falling snow and illuminating the road maybe 50 feet ahead. Everything beyond that was just a gray-white curtain of darkness. That's when I noticed something odd. The mile markers along the side of the road were getting harder to see, which made sense given the visibility. But there was something off about them. I couldn't quite put my finger on it at first. They just looked wrong somehow. Too far apart maybe, or too close together. I tried to calculate the distance between them in my head, timing it against my speedometer, but the numbers didn't add up right. I shook my head, rubbing my eyes with one hand while keeping the other on the wheel. I'd been driving for less than 2 hours. There was no way I was tired already. But my eyes felt strained, like I'd been staring into the snow for much longer than I actually had. The CB radio hissed with static. I reached over to adjust the squelch, but the static just got worse. Then, for just a moment, I thought I heard a voice cutting through the noise. It sounded like someone saying my handle, Big Sky, but the rest was too garbled to make out. I keyed the mic. This is Big Sky on 94 eastbound. Anyone trying to reach me? Nothing but static. I tried again. Big Sky to any station. Radio check. Still nothing. The static continued, rising and falling in pitch like it was trying to form words but couldn't quite manage it. I turned the radio off. The sudden silence in the cab felt almost oppressive, broken only by the hum of the engine and the rhythmic swish of the wipers. The snow was definitely getting heavier now. I had to drop my speed to about 45 miles per hour just to stay comfortable. The road was still visible, marked by the reflective posts on the shoulders, but everything else had vanished into the white. No other cars, no buildings, no landmarks of any kind. Just the road and the snow, and the darkness pressing in from all sides. I've driven through plenty of storms like this. You get into a kind of zone, a state of heightened awareness where everything narrows down to just you and the truck and the strip of road directly in front of you. Time stops meaning anything. You could drive for 2 hours or 20 minutes and it would feel the same. All that matters is keeping the truck on the road, maintaining your speed, watching for any changes in conditions. But something felt different about this storm. I couldn't explain what it was exactly. The snow looked normal. The road looked normal. Everything was exactly as it should be in a winter storm on the northern plains. And yet there was this nagging feeling in the back of my mind, this sense that something wasn't quite right. I passed another mile marker, or at least I thought I did. In the split second it was visible in my headlights, I could have sworn it said mile 108. But that didn't make sense. I'd passed mile 108 at least 10 minutes ago, hadn't I? I checked my odometer, trying to do the math in my head, but the numbers seemed fuzzy. Had I driven 8 miles since the last marker I'd noticed, or 18? How long had I actually been on the road? I glanced at the clock on the dashboard. 6:47 p.m. That seemed right. I'd left Billings around 4:15, so I'd been driving for a little over 2.5 hours. That would put me... where exactly? I tried to picture the route in my mind, the sequence of towns and exits I should be passing. Beach, Belfield, Dickinson. Had I passed Dickinson yet? I couldn't remember. The unease was starting to build in my chest now, a tight knot of anxiety that I couldn't quite shake. I told myself I was being ridiculous. It was just a snowstorm. I'd driven through 100 of them. There was nothing wrong. I was just tired, maybe more tired than I'd thought. The snow was playing tricks with my depth perception, making it hard to judge distances. That's all it was. But then I saw the truck. It was pulled off on the shoulder about a quarter mile ahead, barely visible through the snow. Hazard lights flashing. I eased off the accelerator, watching it carefully as I approached. In conditions like this, you never know what you might encounter. A disabled vehicle, an accident, someone who needs help. I've stopped to assist stranded motorists more times than I can count. It's part of the unwritten code of the road. You help when you can, because someday you might be the one who needs it. As I got closer, I could see it was a Peterbilt, maybe a 379 from the shape of it. Dark blue or black, hard to tell in this light. It was angled slightly off the road, like it had pulled over in a hurry or maybe slid on the ice. The hazard lights pulsed in rhythm, orange flashes cutting through the white. I pulled up alongside it, leaving enough room to pass safely, and looked over as I went by. The cab was dark. No interior lights, no movement that I could see. The truck just sat there, empty and abandoned looking, hazards flashing into the storm. I should have stopped. That's what I would normally do. Pull over, get on the CB, see if the driver needs assistance. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the way the truck looked, so still and lifeless in the middle of nowhere. Maybe it was the feeling that had been growing in my gut for the past 20 minutes, the sense that something about this whole situation was wrong. Or maybe I just didn't want to leave the safety of my own cab, didn't want to step out into the storm and face whatever was out there. So I kept driving. I watched the truck in my side mirror until it disappeared into the snow behind me. The hazard lights kept flashing until they were swallowed by the white. I told myself I'd call it in when I got to the next town. Let the highway patrol know there was a truck on the shoulder that might need assistance. That was good enough. The snow was coming down so hard now that I could barely see 20 feet in front of me. I'd dropped my speed to 35, and even that felt too fast. The white lines on the road were almost completely invisible, buried under several inches of fresh snow. I was navigating by the reflective posts on the shoulders, counting them off as I passed to make sure I was still going straight. The engine droned on, steady and reliable. The heater blasted warm air into the cab. The wipers swept back and forth, fighting a losing battle against the accumulating snow. Everything was exactly as it should be, and yet I couldn't shake the feeling that I was driving into something, some invisible boundary that I couldn't see but could somehow sense. That's when I saw the sign. It was one of those green highway signs, the kind that tells you what exit is coming up and how far away it is. It emerged from the snow for just a moment, close enough to read, Dickinson exit 61, 8 miles. I stared at it as it disappeared behind me, my mind trying to process what I'd just seen. Dickinson, exit 61, 8 miles. But I'd passed Dickinson over half an hour ago, hadn't I? I checked the clock again, 6:52 p.m. 5 minutes since the last time I'd looked. 5 minutes that felt like they'd lasted much longer than that. I checked the odometer. The numbers seemed right, but I couldn't remember what they'd been before. Everything was getting fuzzy, uncertain. I keyed the CB radio, forgetting for a moment that it wasn't working. Static hissed back at me. I turned it off again. The road curved slightly to the right, and I followed it, keeping my speed steady. The curve seemed to last longer than it should have, as if the road was spiraling around itself. But that was impossible. This section of I-94 was almost perfectly straight for miles. I knew this road. Another mile marker appeared in my headlights. Mile 108. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. That was impossible. That was the same marker I'd seen before, or thought I'd seen. I must have misread it. The snow was playing tricks on me, making the numbers look like something they weren't. But even as I told myself that, I knew it wasn't true. I'd seen what I'd seen. Mile 108. The same marker again. The knot in my chest pulled tighter. I forced myself to breathe slowly, deeply. There had to be a logical explanation. Maybe I'd gotten turned around somehow, doubled back without realizing it. But that didn't make sense either. I hadn't made any turns. I'd been driving straight, following the road. The snow seemed to be getting even thicker, if that was possible. It wasn't falling anymore so much as hanging in the air, a solid wall of white that my headlights could barely penetrate. I couldn't see the shoulders anymore, couldn't see the reflective posts. The only thing I could see was about 10 feet of road directly in front of me. And even that was more of a guess than actual vision. This was a whiteout, a real one, the kind where you lose all sense of direction and perspective, where up and down stop meaning anything, where you can't tell if you're moving or standing still. I should pull over, I should stop the truck right now and wait it out. That was the safe thing to do, the smart thing. But I couldn't see the shoulder anymore. I didn't know where the road ended and the ditch began. If I tried to pull over now, I might end up stuck in a snowdrift, or worse, rolled over on my side. So I kept driving, barely crawling along at 20 miles per hour, my entire world reduced to that tiny bubble of visibility around my truck. The engine hummed, the wipers swept, the heater blasted. Everything normal, everything routine, except for the growing certainty in my mind that I was going in a circle. I don't know how long I drove like that. Could have been 20 minutes, could have been an hour. Time had stopped making sense. The clock on the dashboard seemed to be moving, the numbers changing, but they didn't connect to anything real anymore. I was driving through a void, a white emptiness where nothing existed except my truck and the road beneath it. Then I saw the hazard lights, orange flashes in the distance barely visible through the snow. My heart started pounding. I knew what I was going to see before I got close enough to see it. The same Peterbilt, the same dark blue or black paint job, the same angle, pulled off on the shoulder like it had been there for hours. I pulled alongside it, going so slow I was barely moving. I looked over at the cab. Dark. Empty. Exactly the same as before. This wasn't possible. I hadn't turned around. I'd been driving straight, following the road. There was no way I could be back at the same spot. No way. Unless I'd never left it. The thought hit me like a physical blow, and suddenly I couldn't breathe. The cab felt too small, too hot, the air too thick. I cracked the window, letting in a blast of cold air and snow that stung my face. The shock of it cleared my head a little, enough to think. Okay, stay calm. There's an explanation for this. Maybe it's not the same truck. Maybe it's just another Peterbilt that happens to look similar, pulled over in the storm. It's not unusual for multiple trucks to be stopped in weather like this. But I knew that wasn't true. I'd seen enough details the first time. The specific model, the way it was angled, the pattern of the hazard lights. This was the same truck, exactly the same, which meant I was driving in a loop. I felt the panic rising in my throat, hot and choking. I forced it down, made myself focus. Panic kills. Panic makes you do stupid things that get you killed. I'd been trained for this, had dealt with dangerous situations before. Stay calm. Assess the situation. Make a plan. I checked my GPS unit mounted on the dashboard. The screen showed the familiar map of I-94, a blue line showing my road. According to the GPS, I was about 60 miles west of Dickinson, right where I should be. The little truck icon sat on the highway, not moving because I'd stopped to look at the stranded Peterbilt. But if I was where the GPS said I was, then I couldn't be seeing the same truck again. The GPS had to be wrong. Or I was wrong. Or something was very, very wrong with reality itself. I put the truck in gear and started driving again, giving the Peterbilt a wide berth. As I passed it, I looked in my mirror and watched the hazard lights fade into the snow. This time I marked the exact moment they disappeared from view. I was going to pay attention to everything. Notice every detail. Prove to myself that I wasn't going in circles. The odometer read 347,691 miles. I watched the 1/10 of a mile digit click over, out to 2, Y 3, or 4. The road stretched out ahead of me, buried in snow, but still there, still guiding me forward. I was moving. The truck was moving. The miles were adding up on the odometer. I started counting in my head, matching my count to the clicking digits. 1 mile, 2 miles, 3 miles. At 20 miles per hour in these conditions, it would take 3 minutes per mile. I checked the clock, 7:08 p.m. By 7:11, I should have driven 1 mile. 7:11 came and went. The odometer clicked over to 347,892, 1 mile exactly. I felt a tiny surge of relief. See? Everything was working normally. I was making progress. I was moving forward, not in circles. I kept counting. 4 miles, 5 miles. The snow continued to fall, thick and relentless, but I was getting through it. I'd driven through worse. This was just a bad storm, that's all it was. At 7:23, the odometer read 347,896. 5 miles traveled. 15 minutes elapsed. The math worked out perfectly. I allowed myself to relax slightly, loosening my death grip on the steering wheel. My shoulders ached from the tension. I rolled them back, trying to work out the knots, and took a long drink from my thermos. The coffee was lukewarm now, but still strong enough to help. The road ahead looked the same as it had for the past half hour. White, featureless, barely visible. No landmarks, no other vehicles, no signs. Just the endless ribbon of pavement disappearing into the storm. Then I saw them again. The orange flashes, no. No. No, no. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. But it was. There was the Peterbilt, pulled over on the shoulder, hazards flashing, exactly where it had been before. Or maybe it was where it still was. Maybe I'd never actually left. I stomped on the brake, harder than I should have, and felt the back end of the trailer start to slide. I eased off, correcting the skid, and brought the truck to a stop about 50 yards past the Peterbilt. My hands were shaking. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. I sat there for a long moment, engine idling, wipers sweeping, staring at the stranded truck in my mirror. The hazard lights pulsed steadily, orange in the white. This was impossible. I'd driven 5 miles. The odometer had confirmed it. The clock had confirmed it. I'd been moving forward the entire time. There was no way I could be back at the same spot. Unless the odometer was lying. Unless the clock was lying. Unless everything was lying. And the only truth was what I could see with my own eyes. The same truck, the same spot, the same loop. I grabbed my phone from the charging cable and tried to call my dispatcher. No signal. I tried 911, no signal. The screen showed 4 bars of LTE, but nothing would connect. I opened the GPS app, waiting for it to load. The blue dot appeared on the map, and my stomach dropped. According to my phone's GPS, I was in exactly the same spot as I'd been 15 minutes ago. The location hadn't changed at all. 60 miles west of Dickinson, pulled over on the shoulder of I-94. I closed the app and opened it again. Same result. I turned on the truck's GPS unit, the one mounted to the dashboard. It showed the same thing. No movement, no progress, still in the same spot. But I'd driven 5 miles. I'd watched the odometer. I'd felt the truck moving. I'd counted the time. I hadn't been sitting still. I knew I hadn't. Unless I had been. Unless none of it was real, unless I was going crazy. I could feel the panic trying to break through again, waves of it crashing against the walls I'd put up. I closed my eyes and forced myself to breathe. In for 4 counts. Hold for 4 counts. Out for 4 counts. The breathing technique they'd taught us in the defensive driving course. It was supposed to help you stay calm in emergencies. But this wasn't an emergency I'd been trained for. This was something else entirely. When I opened my eyes again, I looked at the Peterbilt. Really looked at it. Studying every detail I could make out through the snow. Dark paint, maybe blue or black. Probably a 379 model based on the distinctive hood shape. Hazard lights flashing. No movement in the cab. I needed to know if there was someone in that truck. I needed to know if this was real or if I'd somehow lost my mind. And there was only one way to find out. I put on my heavy coat, my gloves, my winter hat. I grabbed my flashlight from the door pocket. Then I climbed down from the cab into the storm. The cold hit me like a wall. The wind was stronger than I'd realized, driving the snow sideways and stealing the breath from my lungs. I pulled my hood up and started walking toward the Peterbilt, keeping my flashlight pointed at the ground to help me see where I was stepping. The distance that had looked like 50 yards from my cab felt like half a mile on foot. The snow was nearly knee-deep in places, and every step was an effort. The wind howled around me, making it hard to hear anything else. My flashlight beam barely penetrated more than a few feet into the white. I reached the Peterbilt and walked alongside it, my free hand trailing along the cold metal. Up close, it looked real enough. Snow was piled on the hood and roof. Ice had formed on the mirrors and door handles. The paint was definitely blue, though faded and worn in places. I moved to the driver's side and shone my flashlight up at the window. The glass was fogged on the inside, impossible to see through. I knocked on the door, hard enough to be heard over the wind. "Hey, anyone in there? You okay?" No response. I tried again, pounding on the door with my fist. "Hello! This is another trucker. Do you need help?" Still nothing. I tried the door handle. Locked. I moved to the passenger side, fighting my way through the deeper snow, and tried that door. Also locked. The trailer was a standard dry van, unmarked except for some scrapes and dents that suggested it had been on the road for a while. I walked around to the back and tried the latch. It opened, and one of the doors swung outward with a creak of cold metal. I shone my flashlight inside. Empty. Completely empty. Not even tie-down straps or cargo bars, just a bare aluminum floor and walls. I stood there for a moment, the wind whipping snow into my face, staring into the empty trailer. An abandoned truck with no cargo, no driver, no explanation for why it was here or how it got here. Just sitting on the shoulder of an interstate highway in the middle of a blizzard, hazard lights flashing into the void. I closed the trailer door and latched it shut. Then I started making my way back to my own truck, moving as quickly as I could through the deep snow. The cold was seeping through my coat now, and I could feel the first hints of numbness in my toes. Halfway back, I stopped and turned around, shining my flashlight at the Peterbilt one more time. The hazard lights pulsed in rhythm, orange flashes cutting through the white. As I watched, I could have sworn I saw movement in the cab, just a flicker, a shadow passing across the fogged window. But when I focused my flashlight on the spot, there was nothing there. Just the empty cab and the flashing lights and the snow piling up on the hood. I turned away and kept walking. My truck was a dark shape ahead, barely visible in the storm. The engine was still running, the headlights still on, exactly as I'd left it. Real and solid and waiting for me. I climbed back into the cab and slammed the door shut, grateful for the warmth and the familiar surroundings. My hands were shaking, from the cold, I told myself, not from fear. I pulled off my gloves and held my hands in front of the heater vent, letting the warm air thaw them out. The clock on the dashboard read 7:31 p.m. I'd been outside for less than 10 minutes, though it had felt like much longer. I sat there for a while trying to figure out what to do. I could stay here, wait out the storm, hope that visibility improved and everything started making sense again. Or I could keep driving, keep moving forward, trust that eventually I'd break free of whatever this was. Staying felt safer. But something about the idea of sitting here next to that empty Peterbilt, waiting in the dark while the snow piled up around me, filled me with a dread I couldn't explain. So I put the truck in gear and started driving again. This time, I kept my eyes locked on the odometer, watching every tenth of a mile click by. I checked the clock obsessively, making sure time was passing at the right rate. I searched the white emptiness ahead for any sign, any landmark, any indication that I was somewhere different than before. 1 mile passed, 2 miles, 3 miles. The odometer climbed, 347,897 in 347,898, 347,899. At exactly 4 miles, I saw the orange lights ahead. I didn't stop this time. I didn't slow down. I just kept driving, kept moving forward as I passed the Peterbilt for what might have been the 3rd time, or the 4th, or the 100th. The hazard lights flashed in my peripheral vision and then faded behind me. I drove another 5 miles. The odometer confirmed it. The clock confirmed it. And then there were the orange lights again, right where they'd always been. The loop was tightening. Or maybe it had never been more than a few miles to begin with, and my instruments were just now starting to tell the truth. I'd been driving in circles for hours, trapped in a stretch of road that folded back on itself, passing the same mile markers and the same abandoned truck over and over and over. I kept driving. What else could I do? The snow had stopped falling. I didn't notice it right away. When you've been staring into a wall of white for hours, watching the snow spiral endlessly in your headlights, your brain eventually stops registering the individual flakes. They become a texture, a medium you're moving through, as constant and unchanging as water to a fish. So when they finally stopped, when the air suddenly cleared and I could see more than 20 feet in front of me, it took a moment for my mind to catch up with what my eyes were seeing. The road stretched out ahead, covered in snow, but visible. I could see the shoulders again, the reflective posts marking the edges, the white lines buried beneath a few inches of powder. The clouds above were still thick and dark, pressing down like a ceiling, but the visibility had improved to maybe a quarter mile. After hours of driving through that white void, it felt like being able to see forever. I checked the clock, 9:47 p.m. Over 3 hours since I'd left Billings. But that couldn't be right either, because according to my odometer, I'd driven less than 20 miles. The numbers didn't match up. Nothing matched up anymore. The Peterbilt was behind me somewhere. I'd passed it at least 7 or 8 times now, though I'd stopped counting after the 5th. Each time I approached those orange hazard lights, I felt a little more of myself slipping away, a little more of my certainty that I understood how the world worked. The truck was always there, always in the same spot, always empty and abandoned. A fixed point in a loop that I couldn't escape. But now, with the snow stopped and the visibility improved, I could actually see where I was going. I could navigate. I could find a way out of this. I pressed down on the accelerator, bringing my speed up to 40 miles per hour. The road conditions were still hazardous, plenty of ice underneath that fresh snow, but I needed to cover distance. I needed to break free of whatever this was. The engine responded smoothly, the transmission shifting through the gears as I picked up speed. The tires held their grip on the road. Everything felt normal again, mechanical and predictable. Just a truck driving on a highway in winter. Nothing strange about it. I passed a mile marker. Mile 108. My jaw clenched. The same marker I'd seen at least a dozen times now. But the odometer was still advancing, still counting tenths of miles as they passed beneath my wheels. The GPS on my phone still showed me in that same spot 60 miles west of Dickinson. Nothing had changed. I kept driving. The road curved slightly to the right, the same curve I'd followed so many times before. The curve that should have led me east, deeper into North Dakota, but instead somehow brought me back to where I'd started. Except this time, something was different. As I came out of the curve, I saw lights ahead. Not headlights, and not the orange flashers of the Peterbilt. These were stationary lights, bright white and mounted high, like the lights you'd see at a truck stop or rest area. I felt a surge of hope so strong it made my chest ache. Other people, civilization, a way out. I accelerated toward the lights, watching them grow brighter as I approached. They were definitely mounted on poles, illuminating what looked like a parking area. I could make out the shapes of buildings, low structures that could have been restrooms or a service station. As I got closer, I started to see details. There was a building with a peaked roof, probably the main facility. A smaller outbuilding that might have been storage. Several light poles arranged around a parking lot. And in that parking lot I could see trucks. 3 of them, all pulled into parking spaces, all facing the same direction. Their running lights were off, but they were definitely occupied. I could see the faint glow of interior lights in at least 2 of the cabs. I pulled into the parking lot, my tires crunching over the snow-covered pavement, and found an empty space near the building. As I was maneuvering into the spot, I noticed something odd about the other trucks. They were all the same model and color. 3 identical Peterbilts, all with dark blue or black paint. Just like the one stranded on the shoulder. I completed my parking maneuver and put the transmission in neutral, but I didn't shut off the engine. I sat there with my hands on the wheel, staring at those 3 trucks, trying to understand what I was seeing. One abandoned truck on the shoulder could be explained. 3 identical trucks at a rest area couldn't be a coincidence. But what did it mean? Were they all from the same company, traveling together? Was this some kind of truck convoy that had been caught in the storm? I grabbed my flashlight and climbed down from the cab. The wind had died down to almost nothing, leaving an eerie stillness in the air. The only sound was the idle of my own engine and the faint hum of the light poles overhead. The cold bit into my exposed skin immediately. I pulled my hood up and started walking toward the nearest Peterbilt. As I got closer, I could see that it wasn't just similar to the abandoned truck, it was identical. Same model, same year, same wear patterns on the paint, even the same dents and scrapes in the same locations. I moved to the driver's side window and shone my flashlight into the cab. Empty. Or, at least it appeared to be. The fogged windows made it hard to be certain. I checked the second truck. Also empty. The third truck had its interior lights on, and I could see clearly into the cab. Empty as well. But on the passenger seat I could see a CB radio mic lying in a coil of cable, and on the dashboard, a coffee thermos that looked exactly like mine. I stepped back from the truck, my heart pounding. This wasn't right. None of this was right. I looked at the building. The lights were on inside, shining through large windows that revealed what looked like a typical rest area interior. Vending machines, restroom doors, maybe some benches or tables. But I couldn't see any movement. No people walking around, no signs of life. I walked toward the entrance, my boots crunching in the snow. The door was one of those heavy glass and metal affairs, the kind that takes some effort to push open. I grabbed the handle and pulled. It didn't budge, locked. I cupped my hands around my eyes and pressed my face to the glass, trying to see inside. The interior looked normal enough. Clean floor, working lights, vending machines stocked with snacks and drinks. But there was something off about it, something I couldn't quite identify. It took me a moment to realize what it was: no footprints. The floor was spotless, as if it had just been cleaned and no one had walked on it since. I walked around the building, checking the other doors, all locked. I peered through every window I could reach, but every room looked the same. Clean, well lit, and completely empty. No people, no signs of recent occupation, nothing to suggest this place was actually in use. When I completed my circuit and came back to the front entrance, I noticed something I'd missed before. There was a sign next to the door, one of those official state highway signs with the North Dakota logo. But something was wrong with the text. The letters seemed to shift and blur when I looked at them directly, becoming clear only when I viewed them from the corner of my eye. I stepped closer, tilting my head at different angles, trying to read what it said. The words would almost come into focus and then they'd slip away again, like trying to remember a dream. Finally, I gave up and turned away from the building. I'd deal with the mystery of the locked rest area later. Right now, I needed to figure out what was going on with these trucks. I walked to each Peterbilt in turn, checking the doors, peering through the windows, looking for any clue about who they belonged to or why they were here. All three were locked. All three were empty. All three were identical in every detail I could see. As I was examining the third truck, I heard something. A faint sound, barely audible over the hum of my own truck's engine. I turned toward the source and realized it was coming from beyond the parking lot, out in the darkness past the reach of the lights. It sounded like another engine, another truck approaching. I watched the darkness, waiting for headlights to appear. The sound grew gradually louder, definitely getting closer, but no lights appeared. Just the sound of a diesel engine rumbling through the night, getting nearer with each passing second. I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I backed away from the Peterbilt I'd been examining and started moving toward my own truck. The engine sound was getting louder, but still no lights. How could a truck approach without headlights? It was illegal, suicidal in these conditions. The sound was very close now, maybe just beyond the edge of the parking lot. I could hear the transmission shifting, the air brakes hissing. And then I saw it. A shape emerged from the darkness, just barely visible in the spill of light from the poles. Another Peterbilt, moving slowly across the snow-covered ground, its lights off, its cab dark. It rolled into an empty parking space as if guided by invisible hands and came to a stop. The engine shut off. The sound died away to nothing, leaving only the idle of my own truck breaking the silence. I stood there frozen, watching the dark cab, waiting for a door to open, waiting for someone to step out and explain what the hell was going on. Nothing happened. The truck just sat there, dark and silent, joining its 3 identical companions in the parking lot. I didn't wait to see if anything else would emerge from the darkness. I ran back to my truck, slipping on the icy pavement and nearly falling, catching myself against the side of the trailer. I climbed into the cab and locked the doors behind me, then sat there breathing hard, staring out at the parking lot. 4 Peterbilts now, all identical, all empty, and a rest area that was locked up tight despite its lights being on and looking fully operational. I put my truck in gear and started backing out of the parking space. I needed to get back on the road, needed to keep moving. Staying here felt dangerous in a way I couldn't articulate. As I was turning the truck around, my headlights swept across the parking lot and I saw something that made me slam on the brakes. There was a 5th Peterbilt pulling into the lot, coming from the same direction as the 4th. No lights, no visible driver, just rolling slowly through the snow like a ghost ship. I didn't wait to see where it would park. I pointed my truck toward the exit and accelerated out of the lot, my tires spinning for a moment on the snow before finding traction. In my mirrors, I could see the rest area receding behind me, the lights growing dimmer as the distance increased. I pushed my speed up to 50, then 55, faster than was safe in these conditions, but I didn't care. I needed to put distance between myself and that place, needed to prove to myself that I could still move forward, still make progress. The odometer climbed. The road stretched out ahead. Everything looked normal again, just a snow-covered highway cutting through the darkness. And then I saw the orange lights ahead, the Peterbilt on the shoulder, hazard lights flashing, exactly where it had always been. I let out a sound that was half laugh and half sob. Of course, I was back here. Where else would I be? I didn't slow down this time. I kept my speed and drove past the stranded truck, watching it in my mirrors until it disappeared into the darkness behind me. Then I focused on the road ahead, on maintaining my speed, on covering as much distance as I could before. The rest area appeared ahead, lights blazing in the darkness. I'd been driving for maybe 3 minutes since leaving it. At 55 miles per hour, I should have covered about 3 miles, but here it was again. Impossible and undeniable. I didn't pull in this time. I drove past it, catching a glimpse of the parking lot as I went by. 6 Peterbilts now, all in neat rows, all dark and empty looking. I kept driving. The road curved to the right. I followed the curve. A mile marker appeared in my headlights. Mile 108. Of course it was. I don't know how many times I made the loop after that. 10 times? 20? I stopped paying attention to the specifics. The pattern was always the same, the Peterbilt with its hazard lights, then a few miles of empty road, then the rest area with more and more trucks accumulating in its parking lot. Each time I passed the rest area, there were more trucks. 7, 9, 12. They multiplied like a virus, filling the available spaces, all identical down to the wear patterns on their paint. I tried different speeds. I tried driving in the left lane instead of the right. I tried stopping completely and shutting off my engine, sitting in the dark for 15 minutes before starting again. Nothing changed. The loop remained constant. The odometer kept advancing. According to it, I'd driven over 100 miles since leaving Billings. But I'd never left this stretch of road, this impossibly short section that contained only a stranded truck, some empty miles, and a rest area that was slowly filling with ghost trucks. At some point during one of the loops, I tried my phone again. Still no signal for calls, but the GPS still worked. I pulled up the map and looked at it carefully. The blue dot showed my location, but something about it looked wrong. I zoomed in, trying to see more detail. The road I was on was marked as I-94, but the shape of it wasn't quite right. There were small deviations from what I knew the highway should look like. Subtle curves where there should be straight sections where I remembered curves. I zoomed out, looking at the larger area. The towns and cities were in approximately the right places, but their names seemed slightly off. Not wrong exactly, just shifted. Dickinson was there, but it was spelled differently. Belfield had become Belford. Beach was now Reach. I closed the GPS app and opened it again, hoping it would reset to normal. The same strange map loaded, with the same wrong names and shifted geography. I threw the phone onto the passenger seat and gripped the steering wheel with both hands. My breathing was getting faster, shallower. The panic I'd been holding back was starting to break through. No. Stay calm, stay focused. There's an explanation for this, there has to be. But what explanation could there possibly be? How could I be driving in circles when every instrument told me I was moving forward? How could the GPS be wrong when I could see the satellite signal indicator showing a strong connection? How could identical trucks be multiplying in a rest area parking lot? The only explanation that made sense was that I'd lost my mind, that I was having some kind of psychotic break, some dissociative episode that was causing me to hallucinate or misperceive reality. Maybe I was actually pulled over on the side of the road, hypothermic and dying, and all of this was just my brain misfiring as it shut down. But it felt real. The steering wheel under my hands felt real. The vibration of the engine felt real. The cold air leaking in through the slightly cracked window felt real. How could a hallucination be this detailed, this consistent? I passed the Peterbilt again, past the rest area again. 18 trucks now in the parking lot, past mile 108 again. The loop was getting faster. Or maybe I was just noticing it more now that I'd accepted what was happening. It took less time between passes of the same landmarks, as if the road was contracting, the circle tightening. That's when I noticed the other change. The sky was getting lighter. Not the gradual lightening of dawn, but something else. The clouds overhead were beginning to glow from within, as if there were lights behind them. The darkness was lifting, being replaced by a strange, sourceless illumination that made everything look flat and unreal. The snow on the ground seemed to be glowing too, phosphorescent and bright. My headlights were almost useless now, adding no additional light to what was already there. I turned them off. The road ahead was just as visible without them. I checked the clock, 11:34 p.m. Still night. Still hours before dawn. But the world outside my cab was getting brighter with each passing minute. The temperature was also changing. According to the gauge on my dashboard, it was getting warmer outside. Not just a little warmer, significantly so. In the span of about 10 minutes, the external temperature had risen from 15 degrees to 35 degrees to 50 degrees and climbing. The snow should have been melting. But when I looked out at the road, at the banks of snow on the shoulders, everything was still frozen and white. The temperature gauge had to be malfunctioning. That was the only explanation. Except I could feel it. The heater in my cab, which I'd had blasting for hours, was starting to feel too warm. I turned it down, then turned it off completely. Within minutes, the cab was uncomfortably hot. I rolled down my window all the way, letting in a blast of air that should have been freezing but instead felt like a summer evening. Warm and humid, carrying strange scents I couldn't identify. Not unpleasant exactly, but wrong for this time and place. The brightening continued. The glow from the clouds intensified until it was almost like daylight, but colorless and shadowless. Everything was visible, but everything looked wrong. The colors were off, muted or shifted in ways I couldn't quite describe. I passed the Peterbilt again. In this strange light, I could see details I'd missed before. The license plate was blank. Not missing, but actually blank, as if it had been manufactured without any numbers or letters. The DOT numbers that should have been painted on the door were also missing. The rest area came into view. 24 trucks now, arranged in perfect rows. As I passed, I looked carefully at each one. All had blank license plates. All were missing their DOT numbers. All were identical. And then I saw something that made my blood run cold. One of the trucks near the back of the lot was mine. The same model Freightliner. The same dent in the front bumper from where I'd scraped it on a loading dock 3 months ago. The same mud flaps with the same company logo. Even the same license plate number. My truck was in that parking lot. The truck I was driving was in that parking lot. But I was here, in my truck, driving past the parking lot. Both things were true simultaneously. I was in 2 places at once, or not in any place at all, or somewhere else entirely that only looked like I-94. I let the rest area pass behind me and kept driving, because what else could I do? The road curved to the right. Mile 108 appeared and disappeared. The strange, colorless daylight continued to intensify. Ahead, I could see something new. The road was ending. Not ending like it came to a dead end or ran into a barrier. Ending like it simply stopped existing. About half a mile ahead, the pavement faded away into nothing, into a featureless white expanse that could have been fog, or snow, or just pure emptiness. I eased off the accelerator, letting my speed drop. Every instinct screamed at me to stop, to turn around, to do anything but drive toward that nothing. But I'd been trying to go back for hours, and there was no back anymore. There was only forward into whatever lay ahead. The truck rolled toward the edge of existence. The speedometer dropped. 40, 35, 30. My tires crunched over the snow-covered pavement. The engine hummed its familiar tune. Everything was normal, except for the fact that reality was ending a quarter mile ahead of me. I pressed the brake, bringing the truck to a stop about 100 yards from where the road vanished. I sat there with the engine idling, staring at that white void. Part of me wanted to put the truck in reverse, to back away from the edge, but I knew what would happen. I'd reverse until I reached the Peterbilt, or maybe the rest area, and then when I turned around and drove forward again, I'd just end up back here. The loop had been tightening this whole time, and now it had contracted to its smallest possible form. Just me and the truck and the edge of the world. I could sit here and wait. Wait for what, I didn't know. Rescue? Dawn? For everything to suddenly make sense again. Or I could keep driving. I looked at my hands on the steering wheel. They looked real. I looked at the gauge cluster, the GPS, the coffee thermos in my cup holder. All real. I looked in the mirrors at the trailer behind me. Real. But real according to what standard? What was reality anymore? I thought about the rest area. About that parking lot filling up with identical trucks, including one that was supposedly the same truck I was sitting in. I thought about the Peterbilt I'd passed dozens of times, empty and abandoned and unchanging. I thought about the map on my phone with its wrong names and shifted geography. Maybe I'd been dead for hours. Maybe I'd crashed at some point during the storm and this was just my consciousness looping through its final moments, unable to accept what had happened. Maybe I was in a coma in some hospital, and this was a dream that felt real because my brain had nothing else to reference. Or maybe I was exactly where I appeared to be, and the world itself had become something other than what it should be. I released the brake and pressed gently on the accelerator. The truck began to move forward. 20 miles per hour. 25, 30. The edge of the world drew closer. I could see it clearly now. Not fog, not snow, just pure white nothing. No texture, no depth, no features at all. A void that erased everything it touched. 50 yards away. 40, 30. The front of my truck reached the edge. The hood disappeared into the white. Then the windshield. Then the cab filled with light so bright I had to close my eyes. And then I was driving. The light faded as quickly as it had appeared, receding like a wave drawing back from a shore. I opened my eyes slowly, squinting against the after-images that danced across my vision. I was still in my truck, still behind the wheel, still moving forward at about 30 miles per hour. But everything outside had changed. The road was gone. Or rather, I was still on something that felt like a road. I could sense the tires gripping a solid surface, could hear the familiar sound of them rolling over pavement. But I couldn't see it. When I looked down at where the road should be, there was only white. Featureless, dimensionless white, extending in all directions as far as I could see. The sky was gone too. No clouds, no darkness, no strange glow. Just the same white, seamless, and infinite. There was no horizon, no boundary between ground and air. Everything had merged into a single, colorless expanse. The only thing that still looked real was my truck. The hood stretched out in front of me, solid and dark. The mirrors on either side reflected the cab and the trailer. When I looked behind me through the back window, I could see the trailer perfectly clearly, its white aluminum sides standing out in sharp contrast to the white void surrounding it. But the truck seemed to be floating, suspended in nothing. There was no road visible beneath the tires, no sense of up or down, no reference points of any kind. I should have been terrified. I should have been screaming, should have slammed on the brakes and just stopped moving, should have curled up in the cab and waited for whatever was going to happen next. But instead, I felt oddly calm, almost peaceful. The panic that had been building for hours suddenly evaporated, replaced by a strange acceptance. This was happening. It was impossible, but it was happening, and there was nothing I could do about it except keep driving. So I kept driving. The speedometer said I was doing 30 miles per hour. The odometer continued to advance, 1/10 of a mile by 1/10 of a mile. The engine maintained its steady hum. All the mechanical aspects of driving remained intact, even though I was apparently driving through absolute nothingness. I tried the radio again. Static, as expected. But as I was reaching to turn it off, I caught something in the noise. Not words exactly, but a pattern, a rhythm. Like someone tapping out a message in Morse code, if Morse code was made of pure white noise. I listened carefully, trying to decipher it. Short bursts and long bursts, separated by spaces of different lengths. It repeated every 30 seconds or so. The same pattern over and over. I grabbed a pen and paper from the door pocket and started marking it down, dots and dashes representing the bursts of static. After 3 repetitions, I had the full sequence. SOS. I stared at the paper, my comm starting to crack. Someone was broadcasting an SOS through the static. Someone else was trapped here, wherever here was, and they were calling for help. Or maybe I was the one calling for help. Maybe this was coming from my own radio somehow, my truck broadcasting a distress signal without my knowledge. I keyed the mic. This is Mason Briggs driving a Freightliner on... I don't know where I am. If anyone can hear this, please respond. The static continued, unchanging. The SOS pattern repeated. I tried again. My handle is Big Sky. I'm a trucker. Been on the road for 17 years. I got caught in a storm and now I'm... somewhere else. If you're out there, if you're receiving this, please respond. Please. Nothing but static and that repeating SOS. I set down the mic and focused on driving. The white expanse continued in all directions, unchanging and infinite. There were no landmarks, no way to judge distance or direction. For all I knew, I could have been driving in circles again, and I'd have no way to tell. The temperature in the cab had stabilized at around 70 degrees. Comfortable, but wrong for February in North Dakota. I'd taken off my coat and hat hours ago. Now I was driving in just my flannel shirt, one hand on the wheel, the other resting on my knee. Time moved strangely here. The clock on the dashboard still worked. 12:17 a.m. now, but I had no sense of minutes actually passing. I could have been driving for 5 minutes or 5 hours. There was no way to tell. At some point, I noticed something ahead. At first, I thought it was just another trick of the white. Some optical illusion created by staring into featureless space for too long. But as I got closer, I realized it was actually there. A sign. A highway sign, green with white text, standing by itself in the white void. As I approached, I could read what it said. Exit 108 mile 0. I passed the sign. It stood there by itself. No exit ramp, no road leading away from it. Just a marker indicating something that didn't exist. A few seconds later, I saw another sign ahead. As I got closer, I saw it was identical to the first. Exit 108 mile 0, I passed it. A few seconds later, another identical sign appeared ahead. The signs were coming faster now, appearing every few seconds. All identical, all marking an exit that wasn't there, all indicating mile 0. I stopped counting after the 20th. Then the signs changed. The next one I passed said, Exit 108 mile 1. The one after that, mile 2. The numbers continued to decrease as I passed sign after sign. Mile 5, mile 10, mile 23. The distance was running backward, counting down to some unknown destination or destination. At mile 47, the signs stopped appearing. The white expanse was empty again, featureless and silent except for the hum of my engine and the SOS pattern still repeating on the radio. I don't know how long I drove through the empty white. Could have been hours. Could have been days. The clock kept ticking, but the numbers stopped meaning anything. 12:17 became 1:43, became 3:22, became 12:17 again, cycling through times that may or may not have been real. I wasn't hungry. I wasn't thirsty. I wasn't tired. I just drove because driving was all there was. And then I saw the trucks. They appeared suddenly, without warning. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, stretching out to either side of my path. All Peterbilts. All dark blue or black. All parked in neat rows like vehicles in a massive lot, except there was no lot. Just the white void and the trucks suspended in it. I drove between the rows, looking at them as I passed. They all had the blank license plates I'd seen before, the missing DOT numbers. Their windows were fogged or dark. Most appeared empty, but as I drove deeper into this forest of trucks, I started to see shadows moving in some of the cabs. Not people, not exactly. Just shapes that might have been people, or might have been something else. They moved jerkily, unpredictably, pressing up against the windows and then pulling back, leaving smears on the glass that could have been condensation or could have been something else. I kept driving straight, not slowing down, trying not to look too closely at the shapes in those cabs. The trucks seemed to go on forever, endless rows extending into the white on either side. Then I saw my truck again. It was parked in one of the rows, about 50 yards to my right. The same dent in the bumper, the same mud flaps, the same license plate. and through the windshield I could see a figure sitting in the driver's seat. The figure looked like me. Same build, same flannel shirt, same posture. It was sitting perfectly still, hands on the wheel, staring straight ahead through the windshield. As I watched, it slowly turned its head to look at me. Even from this distance, even through 2 layers of windshield, I could see its face clearly. It was me. Exactly me. Every detail perfect. From the 3-day stubble on my jaw to the scar above my left eyebrow where I'd cut myself on a trailer door 5 years ago. The other me raised one hand and waved. I didn't wave back. I pressed down on the accelerator, picking up speed, trying to put distance between myself and that parking space. But as I drove, I saw more of them. My truck appeared again and again in the rows of Peterbilts. Sometimes it was parked. Sometimes it was driving parallel to me, keeping pace. Each one had a figure in the driver's seat that looked exactly like me. Some waved, some just stared. One was pounding on the window, mouth open in a silent scream. I focused on the path ahead, on the empty space between the rows, trying not to look at the copies of myself trapped in those other trucks. But I could feel them watching me, all those other Masons, all those other versions of me that had ended up here through choices or accidents or random chance. The forest of trucks began to thin out. The rows became more sparse, the distances between them growing. And then, suddenly, I was through. The trucks were behind me, disappearing into the white, and ahead there was nothing but empty space again. I glanced in my mirror. The trucks were already gone, swallowed by the void as if they'd never been there. The SOS pattern on the radio stopped. The static continued, but the repeating message was gone. In its place was something new, a voice. It was distant and distorted, barely audible over the static, but definitely a voice, speaking words I couldn't quite make out. I turned up the volume, leaning closer to the speaker. "Return to," the voice said, cutting in and out. "Can't stay. Hello?" I grabbed the mic. "Hello, I can hear you. Please repeat." "Exit 108, the voice continued, ignoring my transmission. Before the static swelled, drowning out the rest. I waited, but the voice didn't come back. Just static again, endless and meaningless. I looked ahead and saw something new taking shape in the white. At first it was just a smudge, a darker patch in the colorless expanse. But as I drove closer, it resolved into something familiar. The rest area. The same building, the same light poles, even the same parking lot. But it was different now. Smaller somehow, or farther away, or both at once. The perspective was wrong in a way I couldn't quite define. I drove toward it, watching it grow larger and then shrink again, oscillating in size as if I was seeing it through a funhouse mirror. The distance between me and the building didn't seem to decrease no matter how long I drove. Then, abruptly, I was there. The building snapped into normal perspective, and I was pulling into the parking lot, my tires crunching over what felt like pavement, but still looked like white nothing. The lot was empty now. All those trucks, the dozens I'd seen before, the hundreds in that impossible forest, all gone. Just empty parking spaces marked with lines I could sense but not see. I pulled into the same spot I'd used before and put the truck in neutral. The engine idled. The clock read 7:13 a.m., though there was no sign of morning in the colorless expanse around me. I sat there for a moment, trying to decide what to do. Going into the building felt like a bad idea, but sitting in the truck felt worse. At least inside there might be answers, or at least different questions. I climbed down from the cab. The surface beneath my feet felt solid, felt like concrete. But when I looked down, I saw only white. My boots left no tracks. It was like walking on nothing. I approached the door of the building. It was unlocked this time. The handle turned easily, and the door swung open with a soft pneumatic hiss. Inside, the lights were still on. The vending machine still hummed. Everything looked exactly as it had when I'd peered through the windows hours or days ago. Except now I could see what was wrong with it. The floor was white. Not the speckled industrial tile that should have been there, but the same featureless white as everything else. The walls were white. Even the vending machines, when I looked at them closely, were white. Everything had been drained of color, replaced with this blank nothingness that seemed to be spreading through reality like an infection. I walked through the building, my footsteps making no sound on the white floor. There were hallways leading to restrooms, a small convenience store area, what might have been a driver's lounge. All empty, all white. In the back, I found a door marked Office. It was unlocked. I opened it and stepped inside. The office was small, barely large enough for a desk and a filing cabinet. On the desk was a logbook, the kind truck stops use to keep track of who comes and goes. I picked it up and opened it. The pages were full of entries, handwritten in black ink. Names and times, truck numbers, and destinations. I flipped through them, scanning the entries. Every name was Mason Briggs. Every truck was a Freightliner with my license plate number. Every destination was Fargo, North Dakota. The entries went back for pages. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. All me. All the same trip. All recorded in the same handwriting, which I recognized as my own. I flipped to the most recent entry. Mason Briggs. February 11th, 2019. 7:13 a.m. Still driving. That was the date. That was the current time according to my truck's clock. And I hadn't written that entry. I'd never been in this office before. But there it was, in my handwriting, recording my presence at this exact moment. I set down the logbook and backed out of the office. The building suddenly felt threatening, claustrophobic, even though it was completely empty. I needed to get back to my truck. I walked quickly through the white halls, back to the main entrance. The door was still open. Through it, I could see my truck parked in the lot, solid and real in all this whiteness. I stepped outside and stopped. There was someone standing next to my truck. It was me, another me. This one looked older, more worn down. His clothes were the same ones I was wearing, but faded and stained. He was leaning against the truck, arms crossed, looking directly at me. "You should have stopped," he said. His voice was mine, but rougher, strained. Back at Dickinson. Should have pulled over and waited out the storm. I didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at this other version of myself. "I tried everything," he continued. "Different speeds, different routes, even tried driving backward for a while. Doesn't matter. The loop always brings you back. And each time through, it gets a little worse, a little more simplified." "How long have you been here?" I managed to ask. He laughed, a harsh sound. "How long? That's the question, isn't it? According to the clock, it's been about 12 hours. According to the odometer, I have driven 3,000 miles. According to my beard growth," he rubbed his jaw and I could see the stubble was much heavier than mine, "I'd say about 3 weeks. That's impossible. Yeah, add it to the list." He pushed away from the truck. "Here's what I figured out. This place is some kind of fold, a loop in space where the road bends back on itself. We drove into it during the storm, and now we can't get out. The white is the edges of the fold, the places where reality doesn't exist anymore." "How many of us are here?" I asked, thinking of all those trucks I'd passed. "How many times have you already looped?" I tried to count. Lost track after 20. A lot. Then at least that many. Every time through the loop you leave a copy behind, or maybe you become a copy and the original keeps driving. I don't know. But there are a lot of us here now, all stuck, all trying to find a way out. He walked toward me, and I instinctively took a step back. He noticed and stopped. "Don't worry," he said. "I'm not going to hurt you. I'm not even sure I could. I think we're in different layers, maybe. Different iterations of the same moment. We can see each other, talk to each other, but we can't really interact." "The voice on the radio," I said. "Was that you?" "Maybe, or maybe it was another one of us. We've been trying to communicate, trying to warn the newer iterations, but the signal doesn't travel well through the layers. Most of the time it's just static. How do we get out?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I don't think we do. I think this is it. We drove into the fold and now we're part of it. We'll keep looping, keep leaving copies of ourselves behind until there's nothing left but white." "There has to be a way," I said. "There's always a way out." "Yeah, I used to think that too." He turned and walked toward the white expanse. At the edge, where the parking lot ended, he stopped and looked back. "Maybe you'll figure it out. Maybe you're the one who finds the exit, but I've been looking for weeks, and all I've found is more white." He stepped into the whiteness and disappeared. I stood there for a moment, staring at the place where he'd vanished. Then I climbed back into my truck. The clock read 7:31 a.m. now. 18 minutes had passed, though it felt like much longer. I started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot, back onto the invisible road, back into the white. But this time I was looking for something specific. He'd said this was a fold, a place where the road bent back on itself. If that was true, then there had to be a seam somewhere, a place where the fold began. A way to find the edge and drive through it instead of following it back around. I drove slowly, watching carefully. The white expanse seemed featureless, but there had to be something. Some clue, some variation, some sign that would show me where the fold was. The signs started appearing again. Exit 108, mile 0. I ignored them and kept driving. They were just markers, meaningless numbers. What I needed was something real, something that existed outside the loop. Then I saw it, a shadow. It was faint, barely visible against the white, but it was there. A line, or maybe a crack, running perpendicular to my direction of travel. I turned the wheel, steering toward it. The shadow grew more defined as I approached. It was definitely a seam of some kind, a place where the white wasn't quite uniform, like the edge of a piece of paper or the fold in a sheet of fabric. I drove parallel to it for a while, following its course. It curved and twisted, but it seemed to be leading somewhere. I kept following it. The radio crackled. The voice was back, clearer now. "Found the seam. Follow it, but don't cross it." "Why not?" I keyed the mic. "Why can't I cross it?" "Worse, on the other side," the voice said. Nothing on the other side, but I could see something on the other side. Through the seam, visible like looking through a crack in a wall, I could see colors. Real colors. Brown earth, green trees, gray pavement. The real world, just beyond this thin barrier. I turned the wheel sharply and drove straight at the seam. "Don't!" the voice shouted, suddenly crystal clear. "Please don't." The front of my truck hit the seam and everything turned inside out. I was on the road, the real road. I could see it beneath my tires, black pavement dusted with snow. Could see the white lines marking the lanes. Could see the reflective posts on the shoulders and the mile markers and the sky overhead. Gray and clouded, but real. The dashboard clock read 4:37 p.m., February 11th, 2019. According to the clock, I'd been driving for about 20 minutes since leaving Billings, but that wasn't right. I'd been in the white void for hours, maybe days. I'd driven through the loop dozens of times. I'd seen things that couldn't exist. I talked to another version of myself who'd been trapped for weeks. But the odometer told a different story. It read 347 sides, 103 miles, exactly 9 miles more than when I'd left Billings. 9 miles. Not the hundreds of miles I'd driven through the loop. Just 9. I looked around at the world outside my cab. Everything seemed normal. The snow was falling lightly, just as it had been when I'd started the drive. Traffic was sparse but present. I could see taillights ahead, headlights behind. The CB radio was working, crackling with the usual chatter. I keyed the mic with a shaking hand. "This is Big Sky on 94 eastbound. Anyone copy?" "Go ahead, Big Sky." A voice responded immediately. "This is Roadrunner heading west. How's the road looking ahead?" It's fine," I said. "Light snow. Road's a little slick, but passable." "Copy that. Appreciate it. Stay safe out there." I clicked off and just stared at the radio. That was a normal conversation. A normal trucker giving a normal report on normal road conditions. I passed a mile marker. Mile 109. Just mile 109. Not mile 108 again. The numbers were progressing normally, counting up as I drove east. I pulled up the GPS on my phone. It showed me exactly where I should be. 9 miles east of where I'd started, making normal progress toward Fargo. The town names were correct. The roads were in the right places. Everything was normal. I should have felt relieved. I should have felt grateful to be back in the real world, to have escaped whatever that place had been. But instead, I felt a deep unease settling in my gut, because I could remember it. All of it. The loop, the white void, the rest area with its multiplying trucks, the forest of Peterbilts with copies of myself sitting in the cabs. I could remember talking to that other Mason, the one who'd been trapped for weeks. I could remember driving through that seam, that crack in reality. It had been real. I knew it had been real. But according to every instrument, according to the clock and the odometer and the GPS, it had never happened. I'd just been driving normally down I-94, covering 9 miles in 20 minutes, but I could feel the time that had passed. My body knew how long I'd been driving. I was exhausted in a way that 20 minutes of driving couldn't explain. My eyes were strained, my back ached, my hands were cramped from gripping the wheel. This was the fatigue of hours, not minutes. I drove for a while in silence, trying to process what had happened, or what I thought had happened, or what might have been a hallucination brought on by stress and exhaustion. Except I hadn't been exhausted when it started. I'd been alert, rested, completely normal. The exhaustion had come after, from driving through the loop for hours. I passed through Dickinson without incident. The town was there, exactly where it should be, with the correct name and the correct exits. I saw other trucks, other cars, gas stations and restaurants and all the normal infrastructure of a Montana highway town. Everything was normal. I kept driving. The snow continued to fall, light and steady. The road stretched out ahead, leading east toward Fargo. Hours passed in real time, matching what the clock said. When I stopped for fuel in Bismarck, the attendant was cheerful and normal. The coffee tasted like coffee. The bathroom looked like a bathroom. I got back in the truck and kept driving. It was after midnight when I finally pulled into the delivery location in Fargo, right on schedule, despite everything that had happened. Or hadn't happened. I didn't know anymore. I parked the truck and sat there for a moment, engine off, staring at the dark street ahead. The logistics center was closed for the night. I'd have to wait until morning to unload. That gave me time to think, to try to understand. I pulled out my phone and opened the voice recorder app. I needed to document this while it was still fresh in my mind. I hit record and started talking. I told the story from the beginning. The storm, the reduced visibility, the first time I'd passed the Peterbilt with its hazard lights. The loop, the rest area, the white void, the signs counting backward, the forest of trucks, the other me who'd been trapped for weeks, the seam, and driving through it back to reality. I talked for over an hour, describing every detail I could remember. When I finished, I saved the recording and then sat there in the dark cab, wondering if I'd just recorded evidence of my own mental breakdown. The next morning, I unloaded the freight without incident. The warehouse workers were normal. The paperwork was normal. Everything proceeded exactly as it always did. I thought about mentioning what had happened to my dispatcher, but what would I say? I'd been driving normally, making normal time with no delays or incidents to report. The only evidence that anything unusual had happened was in my own memory and in a voice recording that I'd made of myself sounding crazy. So I said nothing. I took my next load and drove my next route, and the route after that, and the one after that. But I couldn't forget. I started paying attention to things I'd never noticed before. The way the mile markers sometimes seemed slightly off. The way the white lines on the road would sometimes blur or shift in my peripheral vision. The occasional flicker in the sky, like static on a screen, gone almost before I could register it. And once, about a week after the incident, I saw another truck pulled off on the shoulder with its hazard lights flashing. A dark blue Peterbilt. I slowed down as I approached, my heart rate spiking. It looked exactly like the one from the loop. Same model, same color, same everything. But as I got closer, I could see differences. This truck had proper license plates with actual numbers. It had DOT numbers painted on the door. And through the window, I could see the driver. A young guy, maybe 30, talking on his phone. He saw me slowing down and waved to indicate he was fine. I waved back and kept driving. Just a normal truck with normal problems, pulled over to make a phone call. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. That somewhere, in some other layer of reality, another version of me was still driving through that loop, or maybe had just entered it, or was about to enter it. I started avoiding that stretch of I-94 when I could. I'd take longer routes that added hours to my delivery time, just to avoid passing through that area. My dispatcher asked about it once, and I made up excuses about road conditions and construction. But sometimes I couldn't avoid it. Sometimes the most efficient route, the only route that made business sense, took me right through that section where I'd entered the loop. And every single time, I watched. I watched for the first signs of the loop beginning. I watched for the Peterbilt with its hazard lights. I watched for the rest area that shouldn't exist. I kept my phone's GPS open, constantly checking that the map looked right, that the town names were correct, that I was where I was supposed to be. So far, it's always been normal, just a regular highway with regular traffic under regular weather conditions. But I know what I saw. I know where I was. And I know that somewhere, maybe just beyond a seam in reality that I can't quite see, that loop still exists. Still traps versions of me. Still has that other Mason walking through white hallways and trying to warn others not to follow the seam. Sometimes, late at night when I'm driving alone on an empty highway, I think I can hear him. A voice buried in the static of the CB radio repeating that same warning. Don't cross the seam. It's worse on the other side. But I did cross it. I got out. I'm here, back in the normal world, driving normal routes, living a normal life. Except I don't sleep well anymore. Every time I close my eyes, I see the white void. I see all those trucks, all those versions of myself trapped in different iterations of the same moment. And I wonder if this is real. If this world I'm in now is actually the real one, or just another layer of the loop. Because here's what I can't stop thinking about. That other Mason, the one who'd been trapped for weeks, he thought he was in the loop too. He thought he was trapped. But what if he wasn't? What if he'd already escaped, just like I did, but convinced himself he was still trapped because the memory was so strong? What if I'm still in there? What if I never left? I passed through Dickinson again today. February 28, 2019. 17 days since the incident. The town looked normal, everything looked normal. But I took a picture of the mile marker as I passed, mile 108. And when I looked at it later, the numbers seemed blurry. Wrong, somehow. I deleted the photo. I don't want to know. I'm going to keep driving my routes, going to keep making my deliveries, going to keep living my life like everything is normal. Because maybe it is, maybe I really did escape, and all these strange little inconsistencies are just paranoia, just my traumatized brain seeing patterns that aren't there. But I made a promise to myself. If I ever see that Peterbilt again, the one with the blank license plate and the fogged windows and no one inside, I'll stop. I'll pull over and I'll walk up to it and I'll look inside, really look, even if I'm terrified of what I might see. Because I need to know. I need to know if this is real, if I'm really here, if I really escaped, or if I'm still driving through the white, following a seam that leads nowhere, leaving copies of myself behind with each loop. I need to know, but I'm not sure I want to know. So I keep driving, mile after mile, hour after hour, day after day. The odometer climbs. The clock ticks forward. The miles pass beneath my wheels in steady progression. And sometimes when the conditions are right, when the snow is falling and the visibility drops, and I'm alone on an empty highway in the middle of the night, I see them. Other trucks, dark shapes in my mirrors, always staying just out of clear sight, pacing me, matching my speed, never getting closer or farther away. I tell myself it's just other truckers, just other drivers heading the same direction, keeping the same pace. Nothing unusual about it, but they're always the same model, always Peterbilts, always dark blue or black. And sometimes when I check my mirrors at just the right angle, in just the right light, I can see the driver, and the driver is me. I don't look at the mirrors as much anymore. I keep my eyes on the road ahead. I watch the mile markers counting up, proof that I'm moving forward, proof that I'm making progress. I watch the clock on the dashboard, counting the minutes as they pass in real time. But I can feel them back there, all those other me's, all those other versions, driving their own trucks through their own layers of reality. Some of them probably think they're in the real world. Some of them know they're not, and some of them, like me, aren't sure anymore. The CB radio crackles sometimes with that voice, my voice, trying to warn someone, or trying to call for help, or just confirming that I'm still here, still driving, still trapped or free or something in between. I don't respond anymore. I just listen. And I drive, because that's all there is. The road ahead, the miles passing beneath the wheels, the engine humming its steady tune. I keep driving. I'm still driving. I'll always be driving, and somewhere, in some other layer, another version of me is just now driving into that storm. Just now passing mile 108 for the first time. Just now starting a loop that he doesn't know he's in yet. I can't warn him, I can't save him, I can only drive. The speedometer reads 55 miles per hour. The odometer climbs 1/10 of a mile at a time. The clock reads 11:47 p.m., March 15th, 2019. Or maybe it's still February 11th. Maybe it's always February 11th. Maybe it's always that moment when I drove into the white. And this is just another layer, another iteration, another loop within loops. I don't know. But I keep driving, because what else can I do? The mile markers count up. 109, 110, 111. The road stretches out ahead, disappearing into the darkness. And behind me, in my mirrors, I can see them. All those other trucks, all those other Mays, following in my wake. We're all going to the same place, wherever that is. I adjust my grip on the wheel and press down slightly on the accelerator. The engine responds. The speedometer climbs. The road continues. I keep driving. I'm still driving. I'll always be. The thing about driving trucks in winter is that you're never really alone. Even on the emptiest stretches of highway when you haven't seen another vehicle for an hour, you know there are others out there. Other drivers fighting the same weather, navigating the same treacherous roads, dealing with the same bullshit from dispatchers who've never spent a winter behind the wheel. We're all part of the same tribe, separated by miles but connected by the CB radio and the unwritten rules that keep us alive. My name is Cole Jennings, and I've been hauling freight for 12 years. Started when I was 26, right after my marriage fell apart and I needed a job that would keep me away from home. Turned out I was good at it. Good at the solitude. Good at reading the road. Good at knowing when to push through and when to pull over and wait. The job suited me in a way nothing else ever had. This happened in January of 2018. I was running a load of automotive parts from Minneapolis to Rapid City, South Dakota. About 600 miles, most of it straight west across Minnesota and into South Dakota on Interstate 90. It should have been an easy run. I'd done it 100 times before. But the weather forecast was calling for heavy snow starting in the afternoon, with blizzard conditions possible by evening. I left Minneapolis at noon, hoping to stay ahead of the worst of it. My truck was a 2015 Kenworth T680, reliable and well-maintained. I'd just had new tires put on 2 weeks earlier, and the engine was running smooth. The load was properly secured. I'd checked it 3 times like I always do. Everything was in order. The sky was already gray when I hit the road, low clouds pressing down like a lid on a pot. The temperature was hovering around 20 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough that any precipitation would be snow. The roads were clear for now, just dry pavement marked with the white residue of road salt from previous storms. Traffic was moderate heading out of the city. Other trucks, commuters finishing their lunch breaks, a few cars heading west for whatever reason. The CB radio was quiet, except for occasional weather reports and the usual complaints about construction zones and speed traps. I made good time through the suburbs and out into the open country. The landscape of western Minnesota is flat and featureless in winter. Just endless fields of snow, broken occasionally by farmhouses and grain elevators. The interstate cuts straight through it like a scar. 4 lanes of pavement carrying traffic across the emptiness. The snow started around 2 in the afternoon, just as I was passing through Worthington. Light at first, just scattered flakes that melted on the windshield. Nothing to worry about. I'd driven through much worse, but within 30 minutes the snow was coming down harder. Not a blizzard yet, but definitely more than light snowfall. Visibility dropped to maybe a quarter mile. I could still see the road clearly, still see the vehicles around me, but the world beyond that was starting to disappear into a gray-white haze. I checked my GPS. The route was straightforward. Just stay on I-90 all the way to Rapid City. About 400 miles to go. At my current speed of 60 miles per hour, that was about 6.5 hours. I'd arrive around 8:30, well after dark, but not unreasonably late. The CB radio crackled. Anyone heading west on 90, This is Diesel Dave at mile marker 47. Snow's getting pretty thick out here, boys. Road's starting to get slick. Keep your speed down and your eyes open. I keyed the mic. Copy that, Diesel Dave. This is Midnight Runner about 15 miles behind you. Appreciate the heads up. No problem, Midnight Runner. It's getting nasty out here. Visibility's dropping fast. Y'all be careful. I clicked off and adjusted my grip on the wheel. Midnight Runner wasn't actually my handle. That had belonged to a driver I knew years ago who'd been killed in an accident. I'd started using it after he died, a way of keeping his memory alive on the road. Probably sounds morbid to people outside the industry, but truckers understand. We take care of our own, even after they're gone. The snow continued to intensify. By the time I crossed into South Dakota, visibility was down to maybe an eighth of a mile. The road was covered now, a layer of white that made it hard to see the lane markings. I'd dropped my speed to 45, and even that felt too fast. Other vehicles were pulling off at every exit, finding truck stops or rest areas to wait out the storm. Smart move, probably, but I had a deadline. The parts I was carrying were needed for a production line that was scheduled to start up the next morning. If I didn't deliver on time, the whole line would sit idle, costing my client thousands of dollars an hour. That's what the dispatcher had told me when he'd assigned the load, making it clear that this was a priority delivery. So I kept driving. The CB radio came alive with chatter. Drivers reporting conditions, warning about accidents, sharing information about which rest areas still had parking available. I listened, but didn't contribute. I was focused on the road, on keeping the truck centered in my lane, on watching for any sudden changes in conditions. That's when I saw the truck ahead. It appeared suddenly out of the snow, maybe 100 yards in front of me. Another semi running at about the same speed I was. I couldn't make out the details through the falling snow, just the basic shape and the glow of the taillights. I felt a small sense of relief. Having another truck ahead of me meant I could follow their tracks, let them break trail through the fresh snow. It's easier than leading, less mental strain. You just maintain your distance and follow the path they've carved. The truck ahead maintained a steady pace, not too fast, but not crawling either. About 40 miles per hour, which felt right for these conditions. I settled in behind them, keeping about 100 yards back, close enough to see their lights clearly, far enough to have time to react if something went wrong. We drove like that for about 20 minutes. The snow was getting heavier, the wind picking up. I had to turn the wipers to their highest setting just to keep the windshield clear. The world had contracted to just the few dozen yards around my truck. Everything beyond that was a wall of white. I checked my GPS to see where we were. The little blue line showed I-90, the truck icon moving steadily west. According to the display, we were about 30 miles east of Mitchell, South Dakota. Still a long way to go, but making steady progress. The truck ahead started to drift slightly to the right, toward the shoulder. I tensed, ready to brake, thinking maybe they were having trouble. But then they corrected, swinging back to the center of the lane. Probably just a gust of wind pushing them off course. I keyed the CB. "Hey, truck heading west on 90 near Mitchell. This is Midnight Runner right behind you. You doing okay up there?" No response. Just static. I tried again. "Westbound truck with Midnight Runner on your tail, just checking in, radio check." Still nothing. Their CB might be off, or broken, or maybe they just didn't want to talk. Not everyone's chatty on the road, especially in weather like this when you need to concentrate. We kept moving. The truck ahead maintained its steady pace, and I followed, watching their taillights like a beacon in the storm. It was almost hypnotic, the rhythmic sweep of my wipers, the red glow ahead, the endless white falling all around us. That's when I noticed something odd about their tracks. The fresh snow was accumulating fast, at least an inch every 10 minutes. but I could still see the marks where the truck ahead was pressing down the snow, creating a faint trail. 2 parallel lines from their tires, clear enough to follow even when their taillights got hard to see through the heaviest bursts of snow. Except the tracks looked wrong somehow. Too narrow, maybe, or too far apart. I couldn't quite put my finger on what was off about them, but something wasn't right. I tried to remember the typical width of a semi-trailer, the standard spacing of dual rear wheels. The numbers wouldn't come to me. I was too tired, too focused on just keeping the truck on the road. I shook my head, trying to clear it. I wasn't tired. I'd had a full night's sleep and 2 cups of strong coffee before leaving Minneapolis. But my eyes felt strained, like I'd been staring into the snow for hours instead of just 90 minutes. The GPS display flickered. Just for a moment, barely noticeable, but I saw it. The blue line of the highway wavered, shifted slightly to the left, then snapped back to where it had been. I tapped the screen with one finger. The display looked normal. We were on I-90, heading west, exactly where we should be. The truck icon moved smoothly along the route, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The truck ahead started to pull away slightly, opening up the distance between us. I pressed down on the accelerator to match their speed, not wanting to lose sight of them. But they kept accelerating. 45 miles per hour, 50, 55. That was too fast for these conditions. Way too fast. The road was covered in snow, visibility was terrible, and they were pushing 60 miles per hour. That was reckless, borderline suicidal. I kept my speed at 45, letting them pull ahead. Better to lose sight of them than to push my truck beyond safe limits. Within a minute, their taillights had faded into the white, disappearing completely. Now, I was alone again. No lights ahead, no lights behind. Just me and the road and the endless snow. I checked the mirrors. Nothing but white. The snow was falling so hard now that I could barely see past the trailer. For all I knew, there could be a dozen trucks behind me, close enough to see my taillights, and I'd never know it. The CB radio was quiet. No chatter, no weather reports, just a faint hiss of static. I tried calling out. "This is Midnight Runner on I-90 westbound, about 20 miles east of Mitchell. Anyone out there?" Static. I waited 30 seconds and tried again. Midnight Runner to any station, looking for a radio check. Nothing. Not even the usual background noise of distant conversations bleeding through on other channels. Just empty static. I turned the radio off and back on. The display lit up showing Channel 19, the standard trucker channel. But there was no sound at all now, not even static. Like the radio was working, but there was nothing to receive. I switched to Channel 9, the emergency channel. Same thing, complete silence. A cold feeling started to build in my chest. I told myself it was just interference from the storm, atmospheric conditions messing with the radio signals. That happens sometimes in heavy weather, nothing to worry about. But I'd never experienced complete radio silence before. Even in the worst storms, there was always something. Static, distant voices, the occasional burst of music from someone's radio bleeding over. Total silence was wrong. I focused on driving. That's all I could do. The road was still there, still visible if I concentrated. The white lines were buried under snow, but I could make out the general shape of the lane by the slightly different texture of the pavement versus the shoulder. I just had to keep the truck centered, maintain a safe speed, and keep moving forward. The GPS flickered again. This time, I was watching it, and I saw clearly what happened. The blue line of I-90 shifted about 30 yards to the north, like the entire road had suddenly moved. The truck icon stayed in the same position, which now put it off the road, driving through empty terrain according to the map. Then, a second later, everything snapped back to normal. The road was where it should be, the truck icon on the highway, everything aligned. I stared at the GPS for a long moment. That was a glitch, had to be. The GPS system was losing satellite signal in the storm and making errors in positioning. Frustrating, but not dangerous. I knew where I was, on I-90, heading west toward Mitchell. As long as I stayed on the pavement, I'd be fine. But what if the pavement wasn't where the GPS said it was? I pushed that thought away. The GPS was the one with the problem, not the road. The road was real, solid under my tires. I could feel it, I could see it, even through the snow. The wind picked up, hitting the side of the trailer hard enough that I felt the truck sway. I corrected, adjusting the steering to compensate. The wind was coming from the north, steady and strong, pushing me toward the shoulder. I had to angle the wheel slightly left just to keep going straight. Through the windshield I could see nothing but white now. Not falling snow, I could see that clearly enough, but just white. Like the snow had gotten so thick that it had formed a solid wall, and I was driving into it at 45 miles per hour. That's when I saw the lights again. Taillights, red in the white, directly ahead. The same truck, or at least I assumed it was. They must have slowed down, or I'd somehow caught up to them despite maintaining the same speed. Relief washed through me. I wasn't alone. There was someone else out here, someone else navigating this storm. I closed the distance to about 100 yards and settled in behind them again. Their tracks were clearly visible in the fresh snow. 2 parallel lines marking the path they'd taken. I aimed my truck to follow those lines, trusting that if they'd made it through safely, I could too. We drove like that for several minutes. The storm continued to rage, but having the truck ahead made it manageable. I could follow their lead, let them worry about finding the road, while I just focused on keeping my wheels in their tracks. Then I noticed something that made my hands tighten on the wheel. There were more tracks. Not just the 2 lines from the truck ahead, but others. Multiple sets, crisscrossing and overlapping. Like several trucks had passed through here recently, all going in slightly different directions. But that didn't make sense. The snow was falling so fast the tracks should have been filled in within minutes. I'd been following this truck for a while, and their tracks were still visible, which was strange enough. But these other tracks looked just as fresh, despite the heavy snowfall. I slowed down slightly, trying to get a better look. The tracks seemed to go in all directions. Forward, backward, diagonal across the road. Some looked like they went off the road entirely, into the ditch or the median. The truck ahead kept moving at a steady pace, following their own tracks. I could see their taillights clearly, maybe 80 yards ahead now. They weren't concerned about the other tracks, weren't slowing down or showing any sign that they'd noticed anything unusual. Maybe they hadn't noticed. Maybe, from their position, they couldn't see what I was seeing. Or maybe the tracks were just normal, the residue of earlier traffic, and I was letting the stress of the storm get to me. I checked the GPS again. Still showing I-90, still showing my position as correct. The highway stretched ahead in a straight line, just as it should. According to the map, Mitchell was about 15 miles ahead. I should start seeing signs for it soon. The truck ahead started to move to the right, like they were taking an exit. I watched them go, their taillights drifting toward where the shoulder should be. Then they were gone, disappeared into the white. I stayed in my lane. I hadn't seen any exit signs, and the GPS didn't show any exits for another 10 miles. They must have been pulling off to check something, or maybe they decided to stop and wait out the storm. Now I was alone again. No truck to follow, no tracks to guide me, just the road ahead, barely visible through the snow. I drove for another 5 minutes, straining my eyes to see any landmarks, any signs, any indication of where I was. Nothing. Just white. The GPS flickered again, and this time it didn't snap back to normal. The blue line of I-90 started to bend and curve in ways that made no sense. The truck icon drifted off the road, then jumped back on, then drifted off again. The map itself seemed to be shifting, towns moving to different positions, roads appearing and disappearing. I grabbed my phone from the charging cable and opened the GPS app. Maybe the truck's built-in system was broken, but my phone would show me the truth. The app loaded, and my location appeared on the screen. But according to my phone, I wasn't on I-90. I was on some rural highway I'd never heard of, about 40 miles north of where I should be. That was impossible. I'd been driving straight west the entire time. I hadn't made any turns. I'd been following that truck, and before that I'd been following the road. There was no way I could be 40 miles off course. I closed the app and opened it again. Same result. I tried a different GPS app. Same thing. I was way off course, on a road that shouldn't exist. I looked up at the road ahead. It looked the same as it had for the past hour. Snow-covered pavement, barely visible through the storm. No signs, no landmarks, nothing to tell me where I actually was. And then I saw the taillights again. The same red glow, directly ahead. The truck I'd been following. They were back, or I'd somehow caught up to them again. I accelerated slightly, closing the distance. As I got closer, I could see their tracks in the snow. Fresh tracks, clearly defined, leading forward into the storm. But there was something wrong with the tracks. They weren't two parallel lines anymore. They were... I leaned forward, squinting through the windshield, trying to understand what I was seeing. The tracks spiraled. They twisted around each other, crossing and recrossing, forming patterns that looked almost deliberate, like someone had intentionally woven their tire marks into some kind of design. But that was impossible. A truck couldn't drive in those patterns. The physics didn't work. The tracks showed the truck moving forward, backward, and sideways simultaneously, which made no sense at all. The taillights ahead kept moving, steady and straight, following tracks that couldn't possibly be theirs. I slowed down, uncertainty gnawing at my gut. Should I keep following? Should I stop? Should I try to find a different route? The GPS on my dashboard had gone completely blank. No map, no position indicator, nothing. Just a gray screen with an error message. No signal. My phone showed the same thing. No GPS, no maps, no way to know where I was. I was lost. Lost in a snowstorm. On a road I couldn't identify, following a truck that might not be real, with tracks in the snow that defied explanation. The logical part of my brain kept trying to find rational explanations. The GPS systems were malfunctioning because of the storm. The tracks looked strange because the snow was drifting in the wind, filling in and distorting them. The truck ahead was real, just another driver trying to get through the storm like me. But the growing dread in my chest wasn't listening to logic. Something was wrong. Very wrong. And I was going to have to figure out what to do about it. The truck ahead accelerated again, pulling away into the white. Their taillights grew dimmer, more distant. I had to make a choice. Follow them or stop. I pressed down on the accelerator and followed them into the storm. Because what else could I do? The truck ahead kept its steady pace, and I followed, trying to ignore the wrongness of everything around me. The tracks in the snow, the dead GPS, the complete silence on the CB radio. I pushed it all to the back of my mind and focused on the only concrete thing I had. Those taillights ahead. We'd been driving like this for maybe 20 minutes when I noticed the compass. Most trucks don't have a traditional magnetic compass anymore. We rely on GPS for direction. But my Kenworth had one mounted on the dashboard. A holdover from a previous owner who'd apparently been old school. I'd never paid much attention to it before, but now I found myself watching it, looking for something to tell me we were still heading west. The compass said we were going north. I stared at it, waiting for the needle to swing back to west, but it held steady, pointing north. Not northwest, which might have made sense if the road had curved. Due north. That couldn't be right. I hadn't made any turns. The road had been straight for the past hour at least. We should still be heading west, should still be on I-90. I tapped the compass with one finger. The needle vibrated but settled back, pointing north. Maybe it was broken. Maybe the magnetic field was being disrupted by the truck's electrical systems. There had to be an explanation. I looked at the road ahead, trying to find any indication of which direction we were actually traveling. But in a whiteout, there are no reference points. No sun, no stars, no landmarks. Just the road immediately in front of you and the white void beyond. The truck ahead was still visible, their taillights glowing steadily. I kept following. What else could I do? The compass needle began to move. Slowly at first, then faster. It swung from north to northeast to east, making a full rotation like a clock hand. Then it spun the other direction, counterclockwise, faster and faster until it was just a blur. I looked away from it. It was just adding to my confusion. The compass was broken, malfunctioning, giving me useless information. Better to ignore it and focus on following the truck ahead. But I couldn't ignore the feeling in my gut that we weren't going the right direction anymore. Maybe we'd turned at some point without me noticing. Maybe the truck ahead had taken a wrong turn and I'd blindly followed. Maybe we were both lost now, wandering through the storm with no idea where we were or where we were going. I tried the CB radio again. This is Midnight Runner, looking for anyone on I-90 or anywhere near Mitchell, South Dakota. If anyone can hear me, please respond. Dead air. Not even static anymore. I tried the emergency channel. This is a truck driver requesting assistance. I'm lost in a snowstorm and my GPS is malfunctioning. If anyone can hear this, please respond. Nothing. I set down the mic and gripped the steering wheel with both hands. Okay, stay calm. Think this through logically. I was on a road. That was certain. I could feel the truck rolling over the pavement. Could see the vague outline of the road ahead. Roads go somewhere. They connect to other roads. Eventually, I'd reach a town, or at least a sign that would tell me where I was. The truck ahead would lead me there. They seemed to know where they were going. They maintained a steady speed, didn't show any signs of being lost or uncertain. Maybe their GPS was working. Maybe they knew something I didn't. I just had to trust them and keep following. We drove for another 10 minutes. The snow showed no signs of letting up. If anything, it was getting worse. The visibility had dropped to maybe 50 feet now. I could barely see the taillights ahead, just a faint red glow in the white. Then they disappeared. 1 second they were there and the next they were gone. Not faded gradually into the distance, but just vanished, like someone had flipped a switch. I maintained my speed, expecting them to reappear. Maybe a thick band of snow had momentarily obscured them. But after 30 seconds they still hadn't come back. I slowed down, scanning the white ahead for any sign of them. Nothing. I looked at the tracks. They were still there, clearly visible in my headlights. 2 parallel lines leading forward into the storm. But no truck. Had they turned off, pulled over? I hadn't seen any exits or side roads. But in this visibility, I might not have noticed. I kept following the tracks. They were all I had now. The tracks ran straight for maybe 50 yards, and then they started to curve. A gentle curve to the right, gradual enough that I barely had to adjust the steering wheel. But something was wrong about the curve. It felt too tight for a highway. Interstate curves are designed for high-speed traffic, with gentle sweeping turns. This felt more like a county road. The tracks kept curving. I followed them, watching the compass spin uselessly on the dashboard. The curve seemed to go on forever, wrapping around in what felt like a complete circle. Had the truck gone around a roundabout? But I hadn't seen any signs, any yield markers, anything that would indicate a roundabout ahead. The tracks straightened out, and I relaxed slightly. But then I noticed something that made my heart skip a beat. There were more tracks crossing the ones I was following. Fresh tracks, clearly defined in the snow. They came from the left, crossed my path at a 45-degree angle, and continued off to the right. I slowed down to a crawl, looking at where the tracks intersected. And that's when I realized. The crossing tracks were identical to the ones I'd been following. Same width, same spacing, same tread pattern. It was the same truck. The truck ahead had crossed its own path, which meant we'd been driving in a circle. I stopped the truck completely and sat there, engine idling, trying to process what I was seeing. The tracks formed an X in the snow directly in front of me. The truck I'd been following had somehow crossed its own trail, which should have been impossible unless we'd been going in a circle the whole time. Unless the road wasn't straight at all, but curved back on itself. Unless I'd been lost for much longer than I'd realized. I put the truck in park and opened the door. The cold hit me immediately, bitter wind driving snow into my face. I climbed down from the cab, my boots sinking into several inches of fresh powder. I walked toward the crossing tracks, my flashlight beam cutting through the falling snow. Up close, I could see the details clearly. The tracks going from left to right were older, already partially filled with snow. The tracks running straight ahead, the ones I'd been following, were fresher. So the truck ahead had passed through here once before, then come back and crossed its own trail. I followed the older tracks with my flashlight, walking alongside them. They led away from the road, or what I'd thought was the road, into what should have been the ditch or the median or just open terrain. But there was no change in elevation. No ditch, no embankment. Just flat ground covered in snow, extending off into the white in all directions. I turned around slowly, playing my flashlight across the landscape. I was surrounded by white. No trees, no fence posts, no power lines, no structures of any kind. Just an endless flat expanse of snow and white sky merging together until I couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. There was no road. I was standing on what I'd thought was Interstate 90, but there was no pavement visible. My flashlight beam showed only snow, smooth and undisturbed except for the tracks. I walked back to my truck, counting my steps, 30 paces from the crossing point. I climbed up and looked at my odometer. It showed I'd traveled 287 miles since leaving Minneapolis. That was about right for 4 or 5 hours of driving. But I wasn't in South Dakota. I wasn't on I-90. I was nowhere. I grabbed the CB mic with shaking hands. "This is an emergency. My name is Cole Jennings. I'm a truck driver and I'm lost. I think I'm somewhere in South Dakota or western Minnesota, but I'm not sure. My GPS is not working. If anyone can hear this, please respond. Please." Silence. I tried my cell phone. No signal. I'd expected that. Cell service was always spotty in rural areas, and in a storm like this, towers could be down. But I tried anyway, holding the phone up toward the roof of the cab, waving it around, hoping to catch even one bar of service. Nothing. I was completely cut off. No radio, no GPS, no phone, just me and the truck, and an endless expanse of white. I looked at the tracks again. The truck I'd been following had gone somewhere. They'd made these tracks and then continued on. If I kept following them, eventually I'd find them, or find wherever they were going. That was my only option. Sit here and freeze, or keep driving and hope the tracks led somewhere. I put the truck in gear and started following the tracks again. The tracks led straight for a while, then curved again. I followed the curves, no longer worried about which direction I was heading. The compass was useless. The GPS was dead. All I had were the tracks. After maybe 15 minutes, I saw something ahead. Not taillights, something else. A dark shape, vertical and motionless. As I got closer, I realized it was a sign. A highway sign, green with white reflective lettering. Relief flooded through me. A sign meant I was on an actual road. Signs meant civilization, meant I was somewhere that people cared enough about to mark. I pulled up alongside it and stopped, shining my headlights on it to read what it said. The sign was blank. Not blank like someone had removed the lettering. Blank like it had never had lettering in the first place. Just a green rectangular panel mounted on 2 posts, completely unmarked. I stared at it for a long moment, my mind refusing to accept what I was seeing. Highway signs weren't blank. They always said something. Exit numbers, town names, distances. A blank sign made no sense. I got out of the truck again and walked up to it. Up close, I could see that the surface wasn't painted green. It was something else, some material I didn't recognize. Smooth and matte, absorbing my flashlight beam rather than reflecting it. I reached out and touched it. It was cold, as expected, but the texture was wrong. Not metal or wood or plastic. Something else. Something that felt almost organic, like stone or bone. I pulled my hand back and wiped it on my jacket, suddenly repulsed by the feel of it. The sign stood there, blank and inexplicable, offering no help and no information. I walked around it, looking for any markings on the back. Nothing. Just the same smooth, unmarked surface. Beyond the sign, I could see more tracks. The truck ahead had passed this sign and kept going. I returned to my truck and continued following them. More signs started appearing. All identical, all blank, all made of that strange material. They were spaced irregularly. Sometimes I'd see 3 in a row within 100 yards, then go 5 minutes without seeing any. The tracks wove between them, sometimes running straight, sometimes curving. I followed them blindly, no longer trying to make sense of anything. Just following, because it was all I could do. I passed the same sign twice. I recognized it by a small mark in the snow at its base, where I'd stepped when examining it earlier. The same sign, the same tracks leading past it. I was going in circles again. I stopped the truck. My hands were shaking. How long had I been driving in circles? How long had I been following tracks that went nowhere? I looked at the clock on the dashboard. 7:43 p. I'd been on the road for 7.5 hours, but it felt like days. I tried to think logically. If I was driving in circles, there had to be a way to break out of them. I just needed to stop following the tracks and pick a new direction. Any direction. I turned the wheel hard to the left and pressed down on the accelerator. The truck lurched forward, tires spinning briefly in the snow before finding traction. I drove perpendicular to the tracks, striking out in what I hoped was a new direction. The compass spun lazily on the dashboard, useless. I ignored it. I drove for 5 minutes in a straight line. No tracks, no signs, no landmarks. Just flat, white emptiness. Then the taillights appeared ahead, the same red glow, the truck I'd been following. They were directly in front of me, even though I'd deliberately turned away from their trail. How was that possible? Unless they'd turned too. Unless they'd also been trying to find a way out and happened to turn in the same direction at the same time. I accelerated to catch up to them. As I got closer, I could see their tracks forming in the snow behind them. Fresh tracks, identical to all the others I'd been following, but I hadn't crossed any tracks getting here. I'd been driving across unmarked snow. These tracks shouldn't exist yet. I pulled up closer, getting within about 50 yards. I wanted to see the truck clearly, wanted to confirm it was real and not some hallucination brought on by stress and exhaustion. Through the falling snow, I could make out its shape. A semi-truck, conventional cab, pulling what looked like a standard dry van trailer. The details were hard to see, but it looked like a Peterbilt or maybe a Kenworth. Dark paint job, could have been black or dark blue. I honked my horn, 3 long blasts, the universal signal for, "I need to communicate with you." The truck ahead didn't respond. Didn't slow down or speed up, just maintained its steady pace. I honked again. And again. Nothing. I flashed my headlights. High beams to low beams and back. Still no response. Either they couldn't see me, couldn't hear me, or were deliberately ignoring me. I tried the CB one more time, even though I knew it was futile. Truck ahead of me. This is Midnight Runner right on your tail. Please acknowledge if you can hear me. I need help. I'm lost, and my GPS is down. Please, if you can hear me, just tap your brakes or flash your lights or something. Let me know you're aware I'm here. No response. The truck ahead continued on, oblivious or uncaring. I moved into the left lane, pulling alongside them. We were close now, maybe 30 feet separating our trucks. I looked over, trying to see into their cab. The windows were dark, not tinted, dark. Like there was no light inside at all, no dashboard glow, no dome light, nothing. Just black glass reflecting my headlights. I honked again, longer this time. The truck ahead didn't react. I accelerated slightly, pulling ahead of them. Once I was in front, I could slow down, force them to stop or at least acknowledge my presence. But as I drew level with their cab, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There was no one in the driver's seat. The seat was empty. No person, no shape, no shadow. Just an empty seat in a dark cab. The truck was driving itself. I hit the brakes instinctively, slowing down fast. The truck ahead, the driverless truck, pulled in front of me and kept going, its taillights receding into the white. I sat there, foot on the brake, heart hammering. That was impossible. Trucks don't drive themselves. Even the newest, most advanced semi-trucks with all their automation and driver assistance features still required a human behind the wheel. There was no such thing as a self-driving semi-truck, not in 2018. But I'd seen what I'd seen. The empty cab, the dark windows, the truck moving steadily forward with no human controlling it. My rational mind scrambled for explanations. Maybe I'd just missed seeing the driver. Maybe they were short and the seat was adjusted in a way that hid them from my angle. Maybe the darkness inside the cab made them invisible from outside. But I'd looked right at the driver's seat, had seen it clearly in the moment my headlights illuminated the cab. It was empty. I was sure of it. I released the brake and started driving again, slower this time. The driverless truck was somewhere ahead, lost in the white. I didn't want to catch up to it again. Didn't want to confirm what I'd seen. But what choice did I have? I couldn't just stop here in the middle of nowhere. I had to keep moving, had to find a way out of this white hell. I drove for another 10 minutes. No signs of the other truck, no tracks. The snow was falling so hard now that tracks filled in within seconds of being made. The visibility had dropped to maybe 20 feet. I could barely see past the hood of my truck. The world had contracted to just this tiny bubble of space, this moving circle of light surrounded by infinite white. And then the tracks appeared again, right in front of me, clear and fresh. 2 parallel lines leading forward into the storm. I knew these tracks. I'd been following them for hours. They were the tracks of the driverless truck. Or were they my own tracks? Was I following myself, driving in circles so tight that I was overtaking my own trail? I stopped the truck and got out, flashlight in hand. The wind was brutal now, almost knocking me off my feet. Snow stung my exposed skin like needles. I walked to the tracks and knelt down beside them, examining them closely. The tread pattern was familiar, but I couldn't place it. Could be from my truck. Could be from the other truck. Could be from any truck, really. I stood up and shone my flashlight ahead, following the line of the tracks. They led forward for maybe 50 feet, and then they ended, not faded away or filled in with snow. They just stopped. The last clear impression of tires in the snow, and then nothing. Like the truck making them had simply ceased to exist mid-stride. I walked toward the end of the tracks, my flashlight beam shaking. The snow beyond the tracks was smooth and undisturbed, no indication that anything had driven over it. I stood at the end of the tracks looking at the empty snow ahead. The truck had gone somewhere. It couldn't have just vanished, unless it had, unless I'd been following something that wasn't real, something that existed only as tracks in the snow, leading nowhere. A gust of wind hit me hard, and I stumbled backward. My flashlight slipped from my numb fingers and disappeared into the snow. I dropped to my knees, feeling around for it, my hands already going numb in the cold. I found it and stood back up, snow clinging to my jacket and pants. I needed to get back to the truck, needed to get warm before I froze to death out here. I turned around and stopped. The truck was gone. Where I'd left it, there was nothing but smooth white snow. No truck, no tracks leading to where it should have been, no sign that it had ever been there. I stood there confused and disoriented. I'd only walked maybe 100 feet. I couldn't have lost the truck that quickly. I played my flashlight across the snow, looking for any sign of it. The falling snow had already filled in my footprints. I couldn't even see the trail I'd made walking to where the tracks ended. I started walking in what I thought was the right direction. 10 steps, 20, 50, no truck. I called out, even though I knew it was useless. "Hello? Is anyone there? I need help." My voice was swallowed by the wind and snow, not even creating an echo. I kept walking, now genuinely panicking. The truck had to be here somewhere. It was a 20-ton vehicle. It couldn't just disappear, but it had. I was alone in a white void, with no truck, no supplies, no shelter. The temperature was probably in the single digits. I'd freeze to death in less than an hour if I didn't find the truck or some other shelter. I forced myself to stop and think. I'd been trained for emergency situations. The first rule was stay calm. Panic kills. I took deep breaths, feeling the cold air sear my lungs. Okay, I couldn't find the truck by wandering randomly. I needed a system. I started walking in expanding circles, using my footprints to mark where I'd already searched. It was hard to see the prints in the falling snow, but I could just make them out if I looked carefully. After maybe 5 minutes, I saw something dark ahead. Relief flooded through me. The truck, it had to be the truck. But as I got closer, I realized it was smaller than a truck. Much smaller. It was a person. They were standing motionless in the snow, their back to me. They wore dark winter clothing, heavy coat, hat, gloves. I couldn't tell if they were male or female. "Hey!" I called out, stumbling toward them through the snow. "Hey, I need help, my truck." The figure turned around. I stopped dead. The face looking at me was my own. Same features, same stubble, same scar above the left eyebrow. It was me, down to the smallest detail. The other me, the double, didn't speak. It just looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. Not hostile, but not friendly either. Just blank. I stood there, frozen, staring at my own face, looking back at me. "What?" I managed to say. "What are you?" The double didn't answer. It turned away and started walking, its footsteps making no sound in the snow. I should have run in the opposite direction, should have done anything except follow it. But I was lost, freezing, desperate. And the double seemed to know where it was going. So I followed. We walked for what felt like a long time. The double maintained a steady pace, never looking back to see if I was still behind it. I struggled to keep up, my legs aching, my lungs burning from the cold air. Then, ahead, I saw a shape emerging from the white. A building of some kind. As we got closer, I could see it was a truck stop. Or, at least it looked like a truck stop. Low building with large windows, gas pumps out front, parking area for trucks. But something was wrong with it. The windows were all dark. No lights inside, no signs of life. The parking lot was empty. The double walked straight toward the entrance and disappeared through the door. I followed, my hand closing around the cold metal handle. I pulled it open and stepped inside. The interior was dimly lit by some unseen source. Just enough to see by, but not enough to banish the shadows. It looked like a normal truck stop. Counter with cash register, aisles of snacks and supplies, restroom signs pointing down a hallway. But it was completely empty. No people behind the counter, no customers, no sound at all. "Hello?" I called out. My voice echoed strangely, like the space was much larger than it appeared. No answer. I walked deeper into the building, looking for any sign of the double or anyone else. The aisles were fully stocked, products arranged neatly on shelves, but they all looked wrong somehow. The colors too muted, the labels too blurry to read clearly. At the back of the store, I found a door marked "Office." I opened it. Inside was a small room with a desk and a filing cabinet. And sitting at the desk, looking at an old-fashioned logbook, was the double. It looked up as I entered, that same blank expression on its face. "Where are we?" I asked. "What is this place?" The double looked back down at the logbook and turned it around so I could see. The pages were filled with entries, each one documenting a truck and a driver. Names, dates, routes. I leaned closer to read them. Every entry was about me. My name, my truck number, my route from Minneapolis to Rapid City. The dates varied, some from days ago, some from weeks ago, some from years ago. I flipped through the pages. Hundreds of entries, maybe thousands, all documenting the same trip, the same route, the same driver. Me. The double stood up and walked to the filing cabinet. It opened one drawer and pulled out a folder. It held it out to me. I took it with numb hands and opened it. Inside were photographs. Aerial photographs, showing a landscape of white. And in each photograph I could see tracks, tire tracks forming patterns in the snow. Spirals and circles and figure eights endlessly overlapping. And in some of the photos, I could see trucks, small, dark specks on the white landscape, following those tracks. I was looking at myself from above, looking at all the times I'd driven through this place, all the loops I'd made, all the tracks I'd followed. This was a map of my journey, or the journey of all the versions of me who'd come through here before. I looked up at the double. "How many of us are there?" The double's mouth moved, and for the first time, it spoke. Its voice was my voice, but flatter, emotionless. "All of you. I don't understand. The storm," it said. "You drove into the storm. Now you're part of it. All of you. Every version that took this route, that followed the tracks, you're all here. How do I get out? You don't." I felt my legs weaken. "There has to be a way, please. I just want to go home." The double looked at me for a long moment. Then it reached into the desk drawer and pulled out a set of keys. my truck keys. "Your truck is in space 47 in the parking lot," it said. "You can drive, but you can't leave. The tracks will always bring you back." It held out the keys. I took them, my mind reeling. "Why are you helping me?" I asked. "I'm not helping you," the double said. "I'm you. We're all you. Some still driving, some already stopped. We're all the same person, caught in the same loop." It walked past me, out of the office. I followed it back through the empty store to the front entrance. Through the glass doors, I could see my truck parked in space 47, just where the double had said it would be. "What should I do?" I asked. The double turned to look at me one last time. "What you've always done. Drive. Follow the tracks. Maybe this time will be different." Then it walked out into the snow and vanished. I stood there for a moment, keys in hand, trying to process everything. Then I pushed through the doors and walked to my truck. It started on the first try. The cab was warm. Everything looked normal. I put it in gear and pulled out of the parking lot. The tracks were there, leading away into the white. I followed them, because what else could I do? I drove for hours, or maybe minutes, or maybe days. Time had stopped working the way it should. The clock on the dashboard continued to move, digits changing, but the numbers didn't connect to anything real anymore. 7:43 p.m. became 9:15 p.m., became 2:30 a.m., became 7:43 p.m. again, cycling through a sequence that made no sense. The tracks were always ahead of me, clear and fresh, no matter how hard the snow fell. Sometimes they ran straight. Sometimes they curved. Sometimes they formed elaborate patterns, spirals and loops and figure eights that my truck followed automatically, the wheel turning under my hands, as if guided by something other than my own will. I'd stopped questioning it, stopped trying to understand. I just drove, following the tracks, because that's what I did. That's what I'd always done. The compass on the dashboard had stopped spinning. The needle now pointed in a direction that wasn't north or south or east or west, but somewhere else entirely. Somewhere that didn't exist on normal maps. I'd covered it with a piece of paper so I wouldn't have to see it anymore. The GPS remained blank. My phone had died hours ago, or days ago, I couldn't remember. The CB radio produced only a faint whisper now, like wind blowing through an empty room. If I listened very carefully, I could sometimes make out words in that whisper, but they were never helpful. Just fragments. Turn around. Still driving. Can't find. Where are we? I'd seen the blank signs probably 100 times now. They appeared with no pattern, sometimes in clusters, sometimes alone. I'd stopped examining them. They were just part of the landscape now, markers of nothing, signs pointing nowhere. The driverless truck appeared and disappeared at random intervals. Sometimes I'd follow its taillights for long stretches. Sometimes I'd pass it, looking into that empty cab, seeing the driver's seat vacant and the wheel turning by itself. Sometimes it would pass me, and I'd follow it until it vanished again. I'd accepted that it was real, whatever that meant anymore. Real in the same way the tracks were real, in the same way this storm was real. Real within the context of this place, this white void I'd driven into and couldn't drive out of. That's when I saw the others. At first I thought it was a hallucination. Shapes in the snow, visible for just a moment before disappearing, but they kept appearing, more and more of them, until I couldn't deny what I was seeing. Trucks. Dozens of them, hundreds, maybe thousands. All around me, visible in brief glimpses through the falling snow. Some were moving, others were stationary. All kinds. Peterbilts, Kenworths, Freightliners, Volvos. Every make and model I'd ever seen on the road, and some I didn't recognize. They appeared and disappeared like ghosts, sometimes solid enough to cast shadows, sometimes translucent like they were made of smoke. But they were there. I was surrounded by them. I slowed down, looking around in amazement. The white void was full of trucks, all of them trapped here just like me, all of them following tracks, or stopped beside them, or sitting in empty parking lots that materialized and dissolved in the storm. I saw drivers, too, figures standing beside their trucks, or sitting in the cabs, or walking through the snow. Most looked lost, confused, frightened. Some just stood motionless, staring into the white as if waiting for something. And some of them were me. I saw my doubles everywhere, standing beside trucks identical to mine, or different trucks, or no trucks at all. Some looked exactly like me, down to the clothes I was wearing. Others looked older or younger, thinner or heavier, but still recognizably me. All versions of Cole Jennings who'd made this same drive, followed these same tracks, gotten caught in this same storm. One of them waved at me as I drove past. I didn't wave back. I kept driving, weaving between the ghostly trucks, following my tracks through this phantom traffic jam. The world had become a palimpsest, layers upon layers of the same journey, all happening simultaneously, all occupying the same space but somehow not colliding. I passed a rest area that looked almost solid, more real than most of the other structures I'd seen. Several trucks were parked there, and I could see figures moving around inside the building, visible through the large windows. On impulse, I pulled in. I needed to talk to someone, needed to confirm that I wasn't the only one experiencing this. Maybe someone else here understood what was happening. Maybe someone had found a way out. I parked and climbed down from the cab. The cold was still bitter, but I'd stopped feeling it the same way. My body was numb, operating on autopilot. I walked toward the building. As I got closer, I could hear voices, faint and distorted, but definitely voices. Multiple people talking. I pushed through the entrance. The interior was brighter than the empty truck stop I'd visited before, and there were people here. Dozens of them, sitting at tables or standing in groups, all wearing winter driving gear. All truckers, or at least dressed like truckers. They stopped talking as I entered. Every head turned to look at me. "Hello," I said, my voice rough from disuse. "My name is Cole Jennings. I'm lost. My GPS stopped working and I've been following tracks and I ended up here. Can anyone tell me where we are?" No one answered immediately. They just stared at me with expressions ranging from sympathy to resignation to fear. Finally, a man stood up from a table near the back. He was older, maybe 60, with a gray beard and weathered face. "You're in the same place we all are," he said. "The storm." "But where?" I asked. "What state? What highway?" "Doesn't matter," another voice said. A woman this time, sitting near the windows. "The storm doesn't follow geography. You're not in a state, you're not on a highway, you're just here." I looked around at the other faces. Some nodded in agreement. Others looked away. "How long have you all been here?" I asked. "I've been here 3 days," someone said. 6 weeks, said another. "I don't know," said a third voice. "Could be years. Time doesn't work right here." The older man who'd first spoken walked over to me. Up close, I could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the deep lines carved into his face. "When did you drive into the storm?" he asked. Today. This afternoon. I left Minneapolis around noon, heading to Rapid City. The storm hit around 2, and I just kept driving. And then I trailed off, not sure how to explain what had happened. "You followed tracks," the man finished for me. "Someone else's tracks, and they led you here." I nodded. Same as all of us, he said. We all followed tracks, or followed lights, or just followed the road thinking we knew where we were going, and we all ended up here. But where is here? I asked again, more desperate this time. The man gestured toward the windows. Through them, I could see the white expanse, the falling snow, the ghostly shapes of trucks appearing and disappearing. Here's where the tracks end, he said. Where all the tracks end, this is where we go when we get lost. I felt my knees go weak. I grabbed the back of a chair to steady myself. There has to be a way out. Has anyone tried? We've all tried, the woman by the window said. Different directions, different speeds, turning around, stopping, keeping going. Nothing works. The storm just keeps going and the tracks keep leading back to where we started. Some people have given up, another voice added. They just park their trucks and stop moving, waiting for something to change. But nothing changes. I looked around at all the faces, seeing the hopelessness in them. These were people who'd been trapped here for days, weeks, maybe longer. People who'd tried everything and failed. I saw doubles, I said. Versions of myself. Other trucks with other drivers who looked just like me. The older man nodded. You'll see more. The storm makes copies. Or maybe we make copies of ourselves. I don't know which. But yeah, there are others of you here. Lots of others, probably. This place. He gestured vaguely at the walls. It's not just one storm, it's all storms. Every time someone got lost, every time someone drove into a whiteout and couldn't find their way back, they ended up here, and their ghosts are still driving, still following tracks, still looking for the way out. I felt like I was going to be sick. That's not possible. That's not how reality works. Reality works different here, the woman said softly. You'll learn that if you stay long enough. I don't want to stay, I said. I want to go home. I want to get back to the real world. So do we all, the older man said. But wanting doesn't change anything. You can go back to your truck and keep driving, keep following those tracks, and maybe you'll get lucky. Maybe you'll find a crack in the storm, a way to slip back through to the other side. A few people claim they have, but I've never seen it happen. I stood there trying to process everything they were telling me. It was impossible, all of it. But I was here, and they were here, and the storm outside was real, and the tracks were real. What do you do? I finally asked. How do you cope? The man shrugged. Some of us keep driving. Some of us stop. Some of us gather here and talk. It helps to know you're not alone, even if we're all trapped together. He paused, looking at me more carefully. But you should know something. The longer you stay here, the harder it gets to remember the real world. The details start to fade. Your name, your life before, the people you knew. The storm erases them. Eventually, you become just another ghost truck, following tracks that lead nowhere. The woman stood up and walked over to us. That's why some of us are still driving. We're trying to hold on to ourselves. As long as we keep moving, keep trying, we stay present, real. Once we stop, once we give up, we start to fade. I looked at her face and noticed for the first time that she was slightly translucent. I could see the wall behind her through her body. She was already fading, becoming a ghost. I need to go, I said, backing toward the door. I need to keep driving. Good luck, the older man said. Maybe you'll be the one who makes it out. But his voice sounded hopeless, like he didn't believe it. I pushed through the door and ran back to my truck. The engine started immediately and I pulled out of the rest area without looking back. I had to get out, had to find a way back to the real world before I ended up like them, faded and forgotten, just another ghost in the storm. I drove faster than was safe, following the tracks wherever they led. The ghostly trucks were still all around me, but I ignored them. I focused on the tracks ahead, looking for any sign that they led somewhere different, somewhere real. The tracks split. For the first time since I'd entered the storm, the tracks actually split. One path continuing straight, the other branching off to the right. I slowed down, staring at the branching paths. A choice. The storm was giving me a choice. I thought about what the people in the rest area had said, about how nothing worked, how every path led back to the beginning, but maybe they hadn't found the right path. Maybe this split was new, something that hadn't been there when they'd driven through. The straight path looked well-traveled, the tracks deep and clear. The branching path looked newer, less defined, like fewer trucks had gone that way. I made my decision and turned right, following the less-traveled path. The landscape changed almost immediately. The white became darker, grayer, like I was driving into a shadow. The ghostly trucks disappeared, leaving me alone again. The snow fell harder, denser, until I was driving through what felt like a solid wall of white. The tracks ahead began to glow. Not bright, just a faint luminescence, like they'd been marked with phosphorescent paint. They were easier to follow now, standing out clearly against the dark gray snow. I drove faster, hope building in my chest. This was different. This path was taking me somewhere new, maybe out of the storm. Maybe back to reality. The glowing tracks curved sharply to the left, and I followed them. The curve tightened, becoming a spiral. I followed the spiral down, or up, or sideways. I couldn't tell anymore which direction was which. The spiral opened up into a straightaway. Ahead, I could see something through the snow. Lights. Not the dim glow of ghostly trucks, but bright white lights cutting through the darkness. Highway lights. Real highway lights, mounted on real poles, illuminating a real road. I pressed down on the accelerator, racing toward those lights. I was going to make it. I was going to escape the storm. The lights grew brighter. I could see more details now, the poles, the road beneath them, the white lines marking the lanes. It all looked solid, real, normal. I drove into the light, and I was back on the highway. I-90, exactly where I should be. The GPS on my dashboard flickered and came back to life, showing my position about 20 miles east of Mitchell, South Dakota. The CB radio crackled with voices, real voices, other truckers talking about road conditions and weather. I'd made it. I'd escaped the storm. I checked the clock, 3:47 p.m. I'd only been gone for 3 hours. 3 hours, not the endless time it had felt like. My odometer showed I'd driven 289 miles since leaving Minneapolis. Everything was normal. I drove for another hour, keeping my speed reasonable, following the normal traffic. The snow had stopped. The sky was clearing. Other trucks and cars surrounded me, all driving like nothing unusual had happened. I pulled into a truck stop near Mitchell to refuel and check my truck. Everything seemed fine. No damage, no unusual wear. It was like the storm had never happened, but I knew it had. I could remember every moment of it. The tracks, the ghost trucks, the doubles, the people in the rest area. It had all been real. I went inside the truck stop and bought a coffee. The clerk was friendly and normal. The other customers were normal. Everything was exactly as it should be. I sat at a table near the window and looked out at my truck. It sat in the parking lot, solid and real, exactly where I'd left it. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I pulled out my phone. The battery showed 47%, which was about right. I opened the GPS app. It showed my location correctly. Mitchell, South Dakota, right where I was. I called my dispatcher. He answered on the second ring. "Hey Cole, how's the drive going?" "It's fine," I said. "I'm in Mitchell. Should be in Rapid City in a few hours." Good. Weather's clearing up out there, right? Yeah, it's better now. Great. Call me when you deliver. He hung up, a normal conversation. Nothing strange about it. I finished my coffee and went back to my truck. I had to keep going, had to complete the delivery. That's what I did. That's who I was. But as I was climbing into the cab, I noticed something that made me stop. There was snow on the hood. Not unusual, it had been snowing earlier, but this snow was arranged in a pattern. Not random, but deliberately placed, forming clear lines and curves. Tire tracks. 2 parallel lines running across the hood of my truck from front to back. Like someone had driven another truck over mine. That was impossible. My truck had been sitting in the parking lot the whole time I'd been inside. No one could have driven over it. I brushed the snow away with my hand, erasing the pattern. Just snow drifting in the wind. Nothing significant. I got in the truck and started the engine. The GPS showed the route to Rapid City. About 200 miles, 3 hours of driving. Easy. I pulled out of the truck stop and merged back onto I-90. The highway stretched out ahead, clear and dry. Normal traffic surrounded me. The sky was blue with just a few scattered clouds. Everything was exactly as it should be. But I kept checking the mirrors, kept watching for any sign of the ghostly trucks, kept listening to the CB, waiting to hear that whisper beneath the normal chatter. And every few minutes I'd glance at the GPS, making sure it still showed me in the right place, on the right road, heading in the right direction. Because part of me knew I was still in the storm. Part of me knew I'd never left. I delivered the load to Rapid City without incident. The warehouse crew unloaded the automotive parts. I signed the paperwork, and I got my next assignment. A load of agricultural equipment heading back east to Sioux Falls. Everything was normal. Everything was exactly as it should be. But I couldn't stop thinking about the storm. I tried to rationalize it. I'd gotten disoriented in a whiteout, had followed another truck's tracks, and had gotten temporarily lost before finding my way back to the highway. The stress and isolation had caused me to hallucinate or misinterpret what I was seeing. The empty cab, the ghost trucks, the doubles, the people in the rest area, all just my mind playing tricks on me. That's what I told myself. That's what I tried to believe. But I couldn't explain the logbook I'd seen in that empty truck stop. The one filled with hundreds of entries all documenting my journey. I couldn't explain how my truck had been in that parking lot when I'd specifically left it somewhere else. And I couldn't explain the tire tracks I'd found on my hood. I kept driving. Sioux Falls, then back to Minneapolis, then down to Des Moines, then over to Omaha. Load after load, route after route. Always moving, always following the GPS and the road signs and the familiar highways. But I started noticing things, small things at first. The mile markers would sometimes be in the wrong order. I'd pass mile 47, then mile 46, then mile 47 again. The gas gauge would read full, even though I hadn't refueled. Other trucks on the road would sometimes flicker, becoming translucent for just a moment, before solidifying again. I told myself it was fatigue. I was working too hard, not getting enough sleep. I needed to take a few days off, let my mind rest. But I kept driving. One night, about 2 weeks after the storm, I was running a load from Kansas City to Denver. I stopped at a truck stop in western Kansas to fuel up and grab some food. While I was inside, I struck up a conversation with another driver, an older guy named Briggs, who'd been driving for 30 years. We talked about the usual things, routes, weather, dispatchers. Then he mentioned a storm he'd driven through years ago. Weirdest thing, he said. Got caught in a whiteout somewhere in South Dakota. Followed another truck's tracks for hours, but I could never catch up to them. Eventually, the storm cleared, and I found myself right back where I'd started, like I'd been driving in circles. Lost about 4 hours that I can't account for. I felt my chest tighten. "Did you see any strange things, like ghost trucks, or blank signs, or—" He looked at me sharply. "How'd you know about that?" "I had a similar experience," I said carefully. "A few weeks ago. Drove into a storm, followed some tracks. Things got weird. I thought I was hallucinating." Briggs shook his head slowly. "Not hallucinating. I've talked to maybe a dozen other drivers over the years who've had the same thing happen. We don't talk about it much. People think you're crazy, but it's real. There's something about those winter storms, some of them anyway. You drive into them and you end up somewhere else. Not quite the same world as before." "But I got out," I said. "I made it back to the normal highway." "Did you?" He looked at me with eyes that had seen too much. "Or did you just think you did? How do you know you're not still in there, following tracks that lead nowhere?" I didn't have an answer for that. He finished his coffee and stood up. "Word of advice. Don't follow tracks anymore. Don't follow other trucks. If you see a whiteout coming, pull over and wait it out. Don't risk driving into it, because once you're in deep enough, you might not get back out." He left before I could ask him anything else. I sat there for a long time, thinking about what he'd said. Then I went back to my truck and looked at my logbook. I'd been keeping detailed records, as required by law. Every stop, every mile, every hour of driving and resting. The numbers should all add up. Total miles driven should match the odometer. Total hours should match the time elapsed. But they didn't. According to my logbook, I'd driven 4,387 miles in the past 2 weeks. But my odometer showed I'd only driven 3,104 miles. A difference of over 1,200 miles. Miles that I'd driven but that my truck hadn't recorded. Or miles that my truck had recorded but I couldn't remember driving. I checked my fuel receipts. They didn't match up either. I'd apparently bought fuel at stations I'd never stopped at in towns I'd never visited. My hands started shaking. I closed the logbook and put it away. I was just making mistakes, that's all. Not paying attention when I filled out the forms. Too tired to keep accurate records. That had to be it. I started the truck and got back on the road. I had a delivery to make. That's what I did. That's all I could do. But as I drove through the darkness, I kept seeing shapes in my mirrors. Trucks that weren't quite there, following at a distance. Sometimes I'd recognize the make and model, a Peterbilt, a Kenworth. Sometimes they'd be my own truck, exact duplicate, pacing me. I tried not to look at the mirrors anymore, just focused on the road ahead. The GPS worked normally most of the time, but every once in a while it would show me in a location that didn't make sense. I'd be driving through Kansas, and the GPS would briefly show me in South Dakota. Or I'd be on I-70, and the GPS would show me on I-90. I started using paper maps as backup. Old-fashioned fold-out maps that showed the highways and towns in clear detail. But even those would sometimes look wrong. Town names I didn't recognize. Roads that weren't on the map before suddenly appearing. Mile markers that led nowhere. I completed the delivery to Denver without incident. Then I got another load, heading to Salt Lake City. Then up to Boise. Then over to Portland. Each delivery successful. Each route completed on time. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still lost. That I'd never actually left the storm. That everything since then had been just another layer of the same nightmare. One night, I pulled into a rest area in Idaho to get a few hours of sleep. I set my alarm for 3 a.m., planning to get back on the road early. I woke up to my alarm going off, 3 a.m. exactly, just as I'd set it. But when I looked outside, it was still dark. Not the darkness of early morning, the thick, oppressive darkness of that storm. And snow was falling. I checked my phone, 3 a.m. I checked the truck's clock, 3 a.m., but it felt wrong. It felt like it had been 3 a.m. for a long time, like time had stopped moving forward. I got out of the truck and looked around. The rest area was empty. No other trucks, no cars, no lights in the building. Just my truck sitting alone in a parking space, surrounded by falling snow. I walked toward the building. The doors were locked. I peered through the windows and saw the same empty interior I'd seen before. In the storm, or in a dream, or in some other version of reality. I went back to my truck and just drove. Away from the rest area, back onto the highway, following whatever road I could find. The snow continued to fall. The darkness continued. 3 a.m. continued. I drove for hours, but the clock never changed. Always 3 a.m., always dark, always snowing. Eventually, I saw lights ahead, another rest area, or maybe the same one. I pulled in, hoping to find someone who could tell me where I was, what was happening. The building was unlocked this time. I went inside and found the older man from before, the one I'd met in the storm. He was sitting at a table, drinking coffee from a paper cup. He looked up as I entered. "You came back." "I never left," I said, the words feeling true even though I didn't want them to be. He nodded. Most people don't realize it at first. They think they got out, think they're back in the real world. But the storm doesn't let go that easily. Once you're in deep enough, you're always in it. You just get breaks sometimes, periods where it looks normal, but you're still here. I sat down across from him. "How long have you been here?" "I don't know anymore." "Years, probably, could be decades. Time works different here." He took a sip of his coffee. "I stopped trying to get out a long time ago. Now, I just exist. Drive sometimes, stop sometimes. It doesn't matter much either way." "There has to be a way out," I said, even though I wasn't sure I believed it anymore. "Maybe," he said. "I've heard stories. Drivers who found the way back, but I've never met any of them. Only ever meet the ones who are still here, still trapped." He stood up and walked to the window. "You can keep driving if you want. Keep following the tracks, keep looking for the exit. Maybe you'll find it. Maybe you're the special one who figures it out. But you don't think so. I think the storm takes what it takes. And once it has you, it doesn't give you back." I left the rest area and got back in my truck. The engine started. The GPS showed a route, though I couldn't tell where it was leading. The road stretched out ahead, covered in snow, marked by tracks. I started driving. I'm still driving. It's been, I don't know how long. The clock shows different times. The odometer keeps counting miles. The GPS shows different locations. But none of it means anything anymore. I pass other trucks sometimes. Some of them look real. Some of them look like ghosts. Some of them are my truck. Exact duplicates with drivers who look exactly like me. I see the blank signs. I see the tracks that spiral and loop and lead nowhere. I see the rest areas that appear and disappear. I see all of it, and I keep driving. Because what else can I do? I completed deliveries. Or I think I did. The paperwork is in my cab, signed and dated. But I can't remember actually making any of them. Can't remember the last time I talked to my dispatcher, or fueled up at a real truck stop, or saw another person who wasn't a ghost or a double. My logbook shows I'm still working. Still running loads across the country. Still making progress. But the numbers don't add up. The miles are wrong. The times are impossible. The routes connect places that don't exist. I found a photograph in my glove box, me standing next to my truck, smiling. I don't remember when it was taken. I don't recognize the parking lot in the background. The date stamp says 2024, but that can't be right. That's years in the future, or Maybe it's years in the past. Maybe I've been driving through this storm for so long that time has looped back on itself. I tried calling home, tried calling friends, family, anyone who might remember me. But my phone shows no contacts. The address book is empty, like those relationships never existed, or like they've been erased by the storm. Maybe I never had a home. Maybe I've always been here, driving through this white void, following tracks that lead nowhere. The tracks are everywhere now. Every direction I look, I see tracks. Some fresh, some old, all of them leading forward and backward simultaneously. The entire landscape is covered in them, layer upon layer, an infinite palimpsest of journeys that never ended. And I'm adding to them. My truck leaves tracks wherever I go, contributing to the pattern. Maybe someday another driver will follow my tracks. Maybe they'll end up here too, adding their own tracks to the endless maze. The storm continues. The snow keeps falling. The white void extends forever in all directions. I keep driving. Because I'm a truck driver. That's what I do. That's who I am. I drive, I'll always drive. The tracks lead forward. I follow them. Where they lead, I don't know anymore. Maybe nowhere. Maybe somewhere I've already been 1,000 times. Maybe somewhere I've never been. It doesn't matter. I keep driving. And if you're reading this, if somehow this logbook or this journal or whatever it is makes it back to the real world, I have one piece of advice. If you're driving and you see tracks ahead of you in a storm, clear, fresh tracks that look like someone just passed through, don't follow them. Find your own way. Because those tracks don't lead anywhere you want to go. They lead here, to the storm that never ends, to the road that loops forever, to the place where lost drivers go and never return. I'm still driving. The odometer reads 351,847 miles. The clock says 3 a.m. The GPS shows no location. And ahead of me, clear in the falling snow, are tracks. I follow them because what else can I do?